Chapter 151, Red Clouds. Katasuya-sama, how long have I been sleeping? Masahiko looked around, then asked after a slight reassurance. It has been a month, Masahiko-sama. Masahiko frowned, he was in a coma longer than what he expected, but that's better than decades. A month? That's okay, Masahiko whispered, thanks for the hard work, Katsuya-sama. Without the help of Masahiko's chakra, Katsuya must have spent a lot of her energy to keep him alive. Masahiko released the summoning technique, then stood up. After easily lifting the red yang formation, Masahiko walked out of the cave. Night? Well, that's okay too. Masahiko looked at the sky and frowned slightly. It doesn't matter, let's go to Konoha. The right thing to do is to go and take back the Rinnegan eyes, but 2 real dreams in a row made him unable to tell whether this is the reality or not, so he decided to confirm it first. The roads, the trees, everything looked familiar as he was flying to Konoha for the second time. Hashirama, Tobirama, Hiruzen. Masahiko counted the heads sculptured on the hokage wall and felt slightly relieved. This timeline should be the right one. Obviously, Katasuya reassured him that it has been only a month, but Masahiko was still worried. Huh? Slightly sensing the village, Masahiko felt that Konoha seemed to be a bit chaotic. It seemed like they were in a battle. What the hell? The Kyuubi broke the seal again? Masahiko thought of this the first time as he was walking through the main gate of the village. This time, the gatekeepers didn't pay attention to him. He walked in to find that a lot of the buildings were damaged. Listening to the people around, Masahiko frowned. 5 powerful enemies invaded the village, and Mito stopped them? After listening to the chatter of some of the villagers, Masahiko gradually understood the situation. This strong version of Konoha was invaded by 5 people? And Mito had to take action in person? Masahiko felt puzzled and quickly walked toward the Senjo station. It's a bit too much. When he reached the station, it was dilapidated, and a few familiar clansmen were working on rebuilding. Slightly sensing the place, Masahiko frowned. Mito isn't here? Masahiko felt helpless. He didn't plan to make any big moves this time when he came back. Kaguruma mind's eye. The village was immediately alerted, and the Umbu around Konoha started moving. At the hospital? No way, Mito will not be injured, Masahiko whispered and hurried to the hospital. At his foothold, a few Umbu suddenly appeared there with Hiruzen leading them. He glanced around pondering, then he waved his hand at the Umbu. It must be Elder Masahiko. In Konoha Hospital, Masahiko saw Mito and Tsunade there with Noeka lying on the bed. Second grandpa, you're back. Mito spoke slowly, and her original young face turned into a middle-aged one. Tsunade was also happy, but before she could speak, Masahiko asked. You had to use that much chakra? What happened? Who attacked us? Mito shook her head. I don't know, there were 5 of them, and they looked very strange. Also, all of them were wearing a black cloak with red clouds. Masahiko was startled. The Akatsuki? How is this possible? When and where did this come from? Mito continued, their eyes seemed weird. I feel insane saying this, but it looks exactly as the legendary Rinnegan described in the books. I've also noticed that their visions seemed to be connected to each other. Also, it felt to me that they are not living people. It's as if someone is controlling them. Masahiko looked even more puzzled. The 6 paths of pain? Obviously, it wouldn't be little Nagato. Then from where did pain came from? Masahiko sighed, then yelled, Black Zetsu, you will not cut it, won't you? Genjutsu release. 10 seconds later, Mito and Tsunade were looking dully at Masahiko, who was closing his eyes. Mito felt that she already knew Masahiko and fully understood him, but this time even she was surprised. Genjutsu release. No matter how hard he tried, the picture in front of him wouldn't break. Heck, it's unreleasable, Masahiko whispered. He then looked at Mito again and sighed, you won't fool me, start talking. He gave up on breaking the genjutsu and waited for what Mito will say. The door of the room was suddenly pushed open, and Hiruzen came in. Masahiko-sama, it's really you. Masahiko nodded, please start the performance, and try your best to convince me. He kept looking at Mito as the latter was shaking her head, feeling puzzled. Great grandpa, what's wrong with you? Tsunade said doubtfully. Masahiko sighed again, cut the crap and start talking, you 3. These words made the 3 of them speechless. After a long time, Hiruzen said, "Tsunade, how is Nawake?" Tsunade sighed with relief, "No more problems." After that, the three decided to ignore Masahiko for a while and talk. Masahiko kept listening quietly, which made him only more anxious because the conversation between the three was flawless. Masahiko looked at his status bar, and the LV9 yen release was still there. Yen release LV9, 5 million, can be merged 1/7. Impossible, I should be able to break Black Zetsu's genjutsu. And obviously, Zetsu must have been successfully sealed inside of me since I've got that message from the system. It seems that someone has really taken Madara's Rinnegan. But how did he manage to use it this flexibly after only 1 month? Masahiko looked up when the three has just finished talking. Hiruzen looked at Masahiko again and said, "Elder Masahiko, I need to go first. I have to check on Orochimaru." When Hiruzen went out, Masahiko frowned then at the two doubtfully. Why does he need to check on Orochimaru? Did he got injured too? Tsunade shook her head, and said bitterly, "Orochimaru is fine, but his parents." Masahiko was stunned. "Orochimaru's parent got killed?" Mito said, "Second grandpa, the 5 people attacked Konoha separately. 3 of them attacked Uchiha Kagami, 1 attacked Orochimaru's parent, and the other attacked Nawake. Kagami and Nawake were just injured, but..." Masahiko was stunned, and seemed to be a bit clueless. "Why only them? Did you kill any of the 5? Masahiko wanted to look at the bodies to see if they were similar to the 6 paths of pain. No, halfway through the battle, they suddenly disappeared, as if they were summoned away. This is why I estimated that they're not living people. It's really the 6 paths of pain." Masahiko sighed, "This man who took Madara's Rinnegan is really troublesome." Chapter 152, Revising the Plot. "Kagami, take care of your injury, I'm leaving now." Masahiko nodded to Kagami then walked out of the ward. Learning from Mito that when the enemies first appeared in Konoha they attacked Kagami, Masahiko went to check on him and see if he could share any useful information. Compared to Nawake, who was still unconscious, Kagami was much useful. According to him, the person who attacked him had the same ability to manipulate the gravity as Masahiko. The enemy also came to him directly, and only targeted him. He even intentionally avoided the other clansmen from the Uchiha, thus, except for his injury, the Uchiha didn't suffer any other losses. Masahiko quickly went to ask Mito again, and the result was the same, which made him a little puzzled. What's the reason? Did they invade the entire village only to attack 4 people? 2 civilians, the Uchiha Patriarch, and a kid. The targets are not connected to each other, and they avoided attacking anyone else. Their goal is really vague. Masahiko pondered, feeling very confused. "I'll go to check on Orochimaru. It's really a pity that his parents still died." "Still died?" Masahiko suddenly froze. Kagami and Nawake should have also died in the original book. No way. The look in Masahiko's eyes suddenly looked sharp, and he immediately rose into the sky and flew toward the land of Whirlpool. Sure enough, when he reached the village, Masahiko felt chaotic fluctuations of chakra. This chakra did Nanako seal the Nibi inside her body? Although they were being invaded, Masahiko kept his calm face. Except for Nanako, who has become the Nibi's Jinchuriki, the chakra of his other 2 disciples seemed normal. The 3 seemed not to be losing to the enemy. Huh? Just when he was about to arrive, the chakra reaction of the 5 enemies suddenly merged into one, and the chakra volume doubled. His concentrating the chakra inside the Deva path? Masahiko thought, and suddenly a vast black sphere slowly rose into the sky. Damn it! Sage Mode Kai! 7th Gate, Gate of Shock, Kai! Masahiko instantly used his full strength and flashed directly to the black sphere. Masahiko flashed at top speed. He destroyed the black sphere before the Deva Path's body launched it at the village. "Sensei, you're back!" The shouts emitted from beneath Masahiko, but the latter was staring only at the enemy in front of him. "It's really the 6th Paths of Pain." Masahiko frowned, "He's even wearing the Akatsuki's cloak." Masahiko looked at the strange face on the opposite side thoughtfully. The Deva Path's body certainly wasn't Yahiko. He never encountered this person before, but that cloak made him a little bit uncomfortable. Looking at him across the sky, the Deva Path nodded, and his lips moved, as if he was saying something, then with a puff, he disappeared. Masahiko was startled. The guy seemed to have said hello to him, which confused him. Kagurum mind's eye. Ignoring his 3 disciples around him, Masahiko tried his best to extend his perception to the limit. There's no for a dozen or so miles, Masahiko couldn't sense chakra fluctuation. The control range is so large. I'm afraid that he's even stronger than Nagato from the original. Who is he? Is it possible that he's another person who crossed over? Masahiko didn't have many explanations, but the land of the whirlpools was attacked as he expected, which confirmed his speculation. The 4 people who were attacked in Konoha have only one thing in common, that is, all of them should have been dead according to the original. Masahiko felt as if someone was deliberately revising the plot, but he failed because he didn't expect Mito to be so strong. As for the land of Whirlpool, if he didn't return in time, I'm afraid it would have got destroyed. So this person who crossed over to the Naruto world wants to revise the plot to the way it originally was without me? No. Masahiko finally remembered the words of the great sage Toad in Mount Myabuku. He said that there would be a young man with a bun, and he will fight against him, bringing disaster and destruction. If he has a bun, then he should be from the modern world and he must be young. Someone capable of bringing disaster and destruction shouldn't be less than the 6 paths level. He appeared now, but in the future, he will also be young. Does it mean that he's immortal, or is it means that he also has a witness point system? No way, that won't be possible. Masahiko didn't overthink it, he turned then to look at his 3 disciples behind him, and the village that has almost destroyed inside. This is unacceptable. The 3 of you first help the tribes to temporarily settle down. But don't rebuild the damaged building, we will move out. The 3 of them froze for a moment, then Yuriko tentatively asked, are we going to the land of thunder? Masahiko shook his head, don't worry about where we're going, I will have my own arrangement. He said this, then bit his finger, summoning technique. Although he talked about moving out, many of the clansmen were injured, so he used Katsuya to help heal them. Great Elder, I've heard that we're going to move away from here. Gensuke came over and said excitedly. Masahiko stared at him, where did you go during the battle? Currently, except for Masahiko and his 3 disciples, Gensuke was the strongest, and he would have been a great assist in such a situation. Gensuke smiled idiotically, I was really lazy in the past 2 years, I just wasn't ready for this. Masahiko sighed and didn't ask more. After all, in these years, the land of Whirlpool was still prosperous under Gensuke's management. Yes, we're going to move, we might encounter a lot of troubles, so be ready to get busy, Masahiko said firmly. Gensuke seemed to have an idea already and said, Great Elder, have you finally agreed to move us to the land of thunder? Masahiko shook his head, it won't be the land of thunder, you will know tomorrow. Gensuke was puzzled, but Masahiko ignored him. After leaving some instructions, he walked toward the direction of Yuna and her family. Since they've lost Yuna, even when the land of the whirlpools got its hands on a large number of materials from the land of thunder, the development could only be said to be good, but it couldn't be called extraordinary. After all, the problem was always how to convert materials into practical things. This time, Yuna came back, and it just happened that most of the buildings in the country were destroyed at the same time. Thus, Masahiko was planning to make a bold, big move. The land of thunder was no longer one of the 5 major countries. And Masahiko decided that the land of the whirlpools will be the new 5th. Chapter 153, Masahiko's Reclamation. Yang release, can be integrated 1/7. LV9, 5 million. The land of Whirlpool was still destroyed. Following Masahiko's orders, they didn't rebuild anything. Masahiko added all the witness points he obtained from sealing Black Zetsu and distributed it to the Yang release. If he didn't add these points, he would really suffer after what he's planning to do later. As for the Rinnegan, Masahiko didn't want to think about it for now. Black Zetsu was sealed, and Madara died. There's no hope for Kagaya's resurrection for now. The long-lost feeling of becoming stronger hit Masahiko's heart again. Upgrading any attribute from LV8 to LV9 grants Masahiko qualitative changes. The first 2 were the Fuinjutsu attribute and the Yin attribute, but their effect wasn't clear, yet he estimated that the first should be applied to the sealing skill itself, and the other to the spiritual force. The Yang attribute is different. It directly affected his body. Masahiko wrapped the wind release in his hand and cut his arm, and it healed instantly. The sage body, just like Hashirama's self-healing, only consumes a little physical strength and more consumes the vitality, but this what I lack most. The body changes lasted for 10 minutes before Masahiko finally adapted to it. Looking at the attribute bar, the body attribute completely caught up and even exceeded ninjutsu, which is nearly 5,000 points, and the technique attribute that defines Masahiko's chakra amount, has almost quadrupled, which is already the size of one-tailed beast's chakra, and it's even still growing slowly. And his rating finally reached SS class. Masahiko walked to the beach, then faced the endless sea in front of him. Finally, after standing there for a while, he pointed his right hand with a pistol's gesture and shot. A small version of the Baijuodama hit the sea, then a low mushroom cloud rose. When the yin release reached the LV9, Masahiko was no longer obligated to spit the Baijuodama out of his mouth like a Baijuyu. Masahiko raised his left hand while smirking and said, "You kidnapped my woman, and now you must die." Then he started shooting with both hands while mimicking the sound of a pistol. Bang, bang, bang. Dozens of small Baijuodama were released one after another, causing a huge wave to rise from the sea. Feeling that the chakra consumption was less than 1/20th, Masahiko nodded in satisfaction. "Please call me Coyote Stark in the future. This skill will definitely make me look more handsome." Note: Coyote Stark, from Bleach, he's an Arrancar and the Primera, first, Espada in Sosuke Aizen's army. He whispered softly, and suddenly Kanikiro flashed in front of him. "Sensei, what happened?" Masahiko looked at Kanikiro with a smile, then shook his head, "Nothing, I'm just trying a new ninjutsu." "Also, Kanikiro, I've changed my mind." He suddenly hesitated, then sighed, which left Kanikiro confused. These days, what scared Masahiko the most was the world Black Zetsu built in his dream. Before, Masahiko thought he could keep the Uzumaki clan in peace because he knew what would happen in each period and who would appear, and Masahiko was confident that he will protect them as long as he's here. But the enemies that appeared suddenly this time made him understand that there will always be a variety of events that he doesn't know. This time, if his coma took longer, maybe something in his dream would have really happened. If Kanikiro ends up opening the 8th gate to defeat the enemy, Masahiko will definitely feel guilty after that. Therefore, Masahiko wants to make a big change this time, so that the future generations of the Uzumaki clan will be able to defend themselves without him. "Sensei." After a while, Yuriko also came over and said, "The civilians have been placed in the temporary shelters. I've also followed your orders and didn't ask them to rebuild anything. Where are we going to move?" Masahiko smiled and pointed to the sea in front of him. "We will move here." Yuriko looked puzzled, but Masahiko didn't explain and slowly ascended into the sky. "Hide away," Masahiko told his disciples, then turned on his Sage mode. Sage mode, dust release, detachment of the primitive world technique. Masahiko directly hit the vast ocean ahead, and the dust release shattered a large area, leaving a bottomless hole in the middle of the sea. Suddenly the sea surface started rotating and descending, and the shore of the land of Whirlpool under the shocked gazes of Masahiko's disciples fell a few miles back. "Sensei, are you?" Yuriko, who looked shocked, seemed to have guessed Masahiko's intention. Masahiko nodded with a smile, flew a few miles forward, and repeated the previous process several times. After 5 repetitions, Masahiko's consumed more than half of his chakra but finally advanced 5 kilometers away from the land of water. Such a big movement alerted Kirigakuer, and he immediately sensed a lot of chakra fluctuations heading toward him. "Uzumaki Masahiko, I thought we have signed a peace agreement, why are you attacking us again?" the third Mizukage shouted. Masahiko waved his hand, smiling, "Well, I didn't break anything in the agreement. I'm just expanding our lands." Multiple shadow clones. Earth release, Earth rising. The shadow clones altogether used Earth release, and a great wall rose 5 kilometers away from the shore of the land of water. Masahiko landed on it, shouting in the direction of the land of water. "Now, this wall has just separated your land from ours, please keep your side of the agreement and don't try to attack us." Regardless of the Mizukage's reaction, and how Masahiko has just turned his country into the land of river, instead of water, Masahiko flew back directly because he had a lot of other things he needed to deal with. The enormous pits created by the dust release were gradually filled with earth release layer after layer to avoid any sudden appearance of fountains. With that, the original ocean zone has finally become inland. I'm so exhausted. Even with Masahiko's yang release being LV9, it was still a long way off. One after another, Masahiko restored his chakra then went all out again. It took him more than 10 days to finally complete. During this period, the Land of Water sent messengers to negotiate, but they were all dispelled by Masahiko one after one. He didn't want to move the Uzumaki away, so he had no choice but to expand the original site to allow the country to develop more. The next step is to build a new country. Such a big place will need a big country to attract other civilians to stay in. Otherwise, it would be meaningless to have such a site. As for other shinobis, Masahiko pondered for a while and decided to let it go. The new Uzumaki country cannot establish a relatively democratic village like the other countries. The Uzumaki's ruling position has been determined, but if there are other ninja clans who wants to stay and accept the Uzumaki's orders, he won't refuse. Moreover, should we also implement a compulsory education for everyone? With the Uzumaki's talent and exceptional physical strength, if they receive more advanced teaching methods, Masahiko won't need to worry about the country's safety in the future. Anyway, the next step is to build. Chapter 154, The New Fun Part. Grandpa Masahiko, you came. Yuna said, watching Masahiko sighing while coming over. It has been more than a month since the extending, and the Uzumaki clan began the construction phase. Most of the buildings were built regarding the villa he made in the previous country on the seaside. Anyway, the place is now large enough to allow civilians in the country to live in such places. Masahiko didn't participate in the construction of these ordinary houses, but he helped to let Yuna set up her own laboratory to do researches and make good use of the materials in the land of Whirlpool. It turned out to be a bad decision, though. Masahiko's leisure life turned upside down, and he became a carver working for Yuna. Yuna's husband's craftsmanship turned out to be good, and all of the things he created were sent to Masahiko so he could use his LV8 sculpting and blacksmithing to transform it according to what Yuna instructed. Masahiko had some ideas on his own too, and the two agreed on creating an automatic cutting machine that can mass-produce kunao in the world of Naruto. Of course, it is the kind of old machine that needs hands and feet. It would be impossible to work automatically in this world. However, if they succeed, many things would be mass-produced as long as ordinary people use the machines. Yuna, what about Nagato? Masahiko held the carving knife he specially created in his hand and asked while adjusting. I sent him to my mother. Yuna is also busy, mainly because Masahiko can only provide a general concept. He forgot everything he knew from his previous life. Therefore, all the specific details must be found out by Yuna. Nagato is only 4 years old now and hasn't yet reached the proper age for ninjutsu. Masahiko was patiently waiting to officially accept his fourth disciple. After hesitating, Masahiko asked again, Yuna, why did you marry a civilian? During this time, Masahiko clarified that Yuna's husband was indeed an ordinary civilian. Although his carpenter's craftsmanship was excellent, it was only that. In terms of invention and creation, he's way far from Yuna, which is really puzzling for Masahiko. Yuna hesitated then smiled wryly, well, this is a long story. It was a dark night with cold wind. Oh, you're not gonna fool me. Masahiko didn't know if he should laugh or cry. Since she grew up by his side, Yuna picked up a few of his tricks. Okay, don't tell me if you don't want. But you need to answer my next question, okay? Why did you had a child, but still didn't come back? Forget about his talent, wouldn't it be better if he grows up in the Uzumaki clan? Well, that's another long story. Masahiko sighed, then shook his head helplessly. I didn't want Nagato to be a ninja. Masahiko was stunned, he didn't expect to get an answer. Why didn't you want him to be a ninja? Yuna lowered her head, then shook it, ninja are prone to danger, and they can die. Masahiko looked at Yuna deeply. At that time, her father was killed in battle when Yuna was young. After a month, Yuna seemed to be okay. But he was foolish to think that such a trauma won't affect a 6-year-old girl's life. No wonder Yuna wasn't keen on practicing ninjutsu at all back in the day. Masahiko shook his head, Yuna, sometimes the danger comes to find you unexpectedly in this world. And hiding Nagato in a megakure will only make you defenseless. Yuna nodded, I was naive before. Speaking of this, if it were not for this accident, would you really spend the rest of your life in a megakure? Masahiko asked again. Yuna shook her head, no, I've always thought of you and Mom back in the land of whirlpools. Maybe I would have come back after 7 or 8 years. Masahiko glared at her, and by then, you will be sure that I've missed the best practice age of Nagato, right? Yuna smiled, then continued working on her design while lowering her head. She chose not to answer, and Masahiko never asked her again. The two of them were busy with their own projects until Yuriko pushed the door and walked in. Yuriko looked dignified, which stunned Masahiko. "Sensei, Konoha needs help." "They're asking for help again?" Masahiko couldn't help but cry. "Has the war restarted?" Yuriko nodded. Because Konoha and the Uzumaki were attacked before, Tsunagakuer started moving again. "Only Tsunagakuer? What about Iwagakuer and Amegakuer?" "I don't have information about Iwagakuer, but Amegakuer seems to be after Kumagak." Masahiko frowned. "It will be really troublesome if Amegakuer to attack Kumagakuer. The Land of Thunder's daimyo's next batch of supplies are about to be delivered. It will be really annoying if Amegakuer rubes it." He didn't want to personally help the Land of Thunder either. It wasn't easy to do that kind of favor. However, it was time for the Uzumaki to develop, and it would be troublesome if those supplies get cut off. Alas, the country is still developing. We can't afford to get robbed now. Still, the main problem is the lack of population. Maybe I should just wait, then go to Amegakuer and ask for the supplies. Masahiko raised his head and smiled, saying, "I found it, Yuriko. We should encourage the birth in the Land of Whirlpool, and especially within the clan." Yuriko froze. Masahiko's answer made her feel dumbfounded. She obviously asked him if they should help Konoha, and suddenly he started talking about encouraging birth. Masahiko noticed Yuriko's expression, then suddenly reacted and smiled helplessly. "Did they ask for help to use me again? Last time I was there, Konoha had the upper hand. Now there are only one or at most two players. Why do they need my help?" Yuriko shook her head, while her expression seemed still dignified. "Sensei, there is also Takigakuer. Their leader seems to have joined the same organization of the people who attacked us before, and Konoha is worried that they will also intervene in the future wars." Masahiko frowned. He didn't expect Kakuzu to still join the Akatsuki. This massive change in the plot made him very uncomfortable. After a while, Masahiko took a breath and whispered, "You want to revise the plot, right? Let's see you try. You tell Konoha that I know what kind of person Kakuzu is. If he doesn't want to help, it would definitely be because of the price. Add more and see what he'll say. As for us, let us work harder to build a new country first." After he sent Yuriko off, Masahiko started working harder. "I'm always worried about the plot, but now this person seems to be more anxious than me about it, which is a little bit interesting. From now on, I will not fix it, I will change it. The Land of the Whirlpool has become the new 5, and the cutting machine will definitely be built, and this world will enter the era of mass production. Show me what's you're gonna do about it." Bored for a long time, Masahiko felt that he has finally entered a new fun part of his life. Chapter 155, Kagaya's Will Mode. "Great-grandpa, let me go, I'm going to battle." Noeki was yelling and shouting, while Masahiko on the side, shoving his ears and yawning helplessly. After rejecting Konoha's request for help, Masahiko suddenly remembered that Noeki was still there, and rushed to Konoha overnight, preparing to tie Noeki and drag him to the Uzumaki clan and take care of him. "Great-grandpa, would you let me go to the battlefield if I say yes?" Noeki pleaded softly after failing the hard way. "Noeki, you're still injured, and Great-grandpa will take you with him to the Uzumaki clan, and personally train you. How many people do you think had such an honor?" Aside, Tsunade tried to persuade him. "There's no need for that, I'll just take him away, and it's over." Masahiko waved his hand and said, "Also, if you had the chance to see Kagami, tell him to be more careful. Those people who came to Konoha before may target him again." Tsunade was startled, "And Noeki?" Masahiko shook his head, "Yes, they're targeting him too, but they won't dare to come at him while I'm around, rest assured." After saying that, Masahiko ignored the still struggling Noeki and floated him to the sky, then went straight to the Land of the Whirlpools. On the way, Masahiko almost fell asleep a few times because he didn't get any rest the couple of few days. Returning to the Uzumaki, Masahiko tied up Noeki and called 2 people to take care of him. Then went straight to his home and collapsed on his bed. However, 10 minutes later, Masahiko opened his eyes helplessly and sighed, "Damn it, I have insomnia." He couldn't help but think of the 6 paths of pain, and how the one controlling these people was deliberately trying to correct the plot. "When I encountered the Deva path, he actually greeted me. Does it mean he knows me?" But I have never seen a young man with a bun before. Bun Mito? Hiruzen? Masahiko kept thinking and recalling people he met before, and gradually his consciousness became blurry, and he finally fell asleep. The next day, he woke up by a sudden knock on the door. Grandpa Masahiko, wake up, it's time to work. Masahiko sighed helplessly upon hearing Yuna's voice. No, I'm tired. Shadow clone. You go with her, wait. Masahiko suddenly felt so stupid, why didn't he do that before? Yuna, let's go. The clone led the way, and Yuna followed. Masahiko sighed with relief, but he was awake and wasn't in a good mood to sleep again. After bringing Nawaka last night, he had no choice but to go and look after him. The two clansmen guarding Nawaka were already drowsy. Masahiko didn't make it clear yesterday, so they thoroughly treated him as a prisoner. Masahiko smiled helplessly, you two worked hard, go and rest. Yes, great elder. Masahiko nodded, then walked into the house. Masahiko went inside and felt that Nawaka has been troubled enough already. The poor boy seems to have unintentionally slept while sitting. Thus, Masahiko didn't rush to wake him up. Masahiko will never allow him to go to the battlefield in such a state, he must be able to protect himself before he could let him out of sight. As for training, the 14-years-old Nawaka already has the strength of a Chunin, he lacks a lot of things, but Masahiko really doesn't know what to teach him. He has 3 chakra nature, water, wind, and earth, he learned how to use Raise-Non, which is good, but his physical strength and chakra volume are not up to the standards to learn Raise and Shuriken. So, I will teach him how to control Earth Release first. Earth Release is better for saving lives, and it has a lot of defensive ninjutsu. Masahiko whispered, looked at Nawaka, who was still asleep, then he raised his eyebrows, and the bed started shaking violently, and Nawaka got thrown out. Nawaka landed smoothly, but when he saw Masahiko, he sighed like a little old man. Masahiko shook his head helplessly, come on, don't act like this, I will teach you some good tricks today. Nawaka's spirit was finally lifted a little and followed Masahiko to the Uzumaki clan's training ground that has just been built. Look at this. Earth Release, hiding in rock technique. With one hand sign, Masahiko went in and out of the ground. The corner of Nawaka's mouth twitched, Great Grandpa, is this what you call a good technique? Isn't this an escaping technique? Masahiko glared at him, what an ignorant kid. Do you know that this technique helped me defeat Uchiha Madara's genjutsu, only after I've broken out of his technique people called me the Majestic Uzumaki. The Majestic Uzumaki? Nawaka seemed doubtful. However, noticing the annoyance in Masahiko's eyes, he began to practice in desperation. There are only 4 seals connected to the Earth Release. Once you've seen it, you can fully remember it, but it's not easy to learn. Nawaka's talent for ninjutsu is pretty good. After watching it once, he imitated the shape, then used the hand signs. But nothing happened. Masahiko's ability to perceive was on, and he immediately pointed out the mistakes that Nawaka made. About half an hour later, Masahiko explained every single detail, and the rest was up to Nawaka to practice it. Masahiko asked him to work hard, then he walked away, with a dignified and troubled face. When he cast hiding in rock technique just now, it felt exceptionally smooth. Although his Earth Release was LV8, this feeling he has never experienced before. Is it Black Zetsu? Masahiko opened his clothes 100 meters away from Nawaka, then stared at his stomach. Because I was in a hurry, the sealing technique was too messy. 4 trigrams sealing style release. Masahiko lifted several basic 4 trigrams sealing style seals, yet Zetsu seemed to be still sealed. However, he felt there has been a little change. I seem to be able to. As soon as Masahiko said that, he entered a strange state. Great Grandpa, what's wrong with you, why is your face so dark? Nawaka noticed the situation here and came over. Masahiko frowned, then used a hand sign, water release, water shield. His face was reflected on the water shield. A layer of blackness covered his face. It looked a lot like Black Zetsu's skin color. Masahiko quickly rolled up his sleeves, and his arms have the same color. Looking at Nawaka on the opposite side, he felt inexplicable irritability in his heart. With a shock in his heart, he quickly released the state. Instantly everything went back to normal. Masahiko sighed with relief, then spoke slowly, it's nothing, you go back and practice. As Nawaka walked away, Masahiko frowned, that rage just now it was infested by black zetsu. It's worth of Kagaya's wool, he's so dark. So, how can I use this? Masahiko was curious and entered that state again. Without the seal, he could go in and out smoothly, but in this state, it was faster and easier, he felt like a fish swimming in a river. Escaping skill, is this all that Kagaya's wool mode has to offer me? Masahiko sighed, feeling a little weak. Others have Baijuya mode, and I'm stuck with this black zetsu. However, I want to believe that there's more. Fortunately, I have all the time in the world to study it and see what else I can gain from Kagaya's. Chapter 156, Konoha's White Fang. The new country of the Uzumaki was being constructed for more than half a year now. And it will be finally completed in the upcoming of the 34th year of Konoha. The other villages outside were really at it, but the Uzumaki seemed to be in a paradise. Since Masahiko there, no one dared to disturb the Uzumaki, even that guy. The country of the Uzumaki didn't hold another found ceremony, doing that twice didn't seem right. But you can't just ask people not to celebrate. Therefore, Gensuke and Nanako decided to say a few words and helped the civilians to their new homes. It was truly a lively and bustling scene. However, the country was more than 10 times larger than before. Including the ninjas to the civilians, they still occupied only a quarter of the place. I still have to find a way to expand the population, we want to be a big country, but this is not enough. Masahiko wandered on the brand new streets feeling happy. In the past 6 months, his and Yuna's research had achieved small results, and now it's just a little bit less stable, and the scrap rate is relatively high. It's estimated that when the accuracy is improved, there will be mass production, and the country of the Uzumaki will finally have a stable economic source. Currently, the land of Whirlpool has no special production, and no land farming. For the past 6 months all they did is rely on the grounds and materials delivered to them by the Land of Thunder. In the face of the surprising invasion of Iwagakure, the daimyo sent 20% more of the materials they agreed on and only left what they needed to maintain the country's normal operations. Therefore, with full of sincerity, Masahiko personally ran to Iwagakure and dissuaded Onaki. That's all that he did, but what happened after that was superfluous. Even Masahiko didn't know how did this happen, but Iwagakure suddenly decided to attack Iwagakure madly. Therefore, Iwagakure had to retreat because they couldn't just deal with 2 fronts. As for the land of Whirlpool, of course, they used to have some farms, but the land was completely destroyed when that guy attacked, and it will take time to plant a few more again. Moreover, the new land of Whirlpool is closer to the ocean now, and it might not be suitable for farming at the moment. It's estimated that it will take 2 years, so the country will lose its ability to be self-sufficient in the time being. I want us to be the new 5th country, but it might take time, and the plot should know, I have time, I shouldn't worry. Masahiko's policy of encouraging fertility has been implemented, and it is estimated the results will appear in the upcoming years. More children from the clan will play in these new streets soon. Next is a ninja academy. Masahiko couldn't apply compulsorily free education, because there will be too many ninjas, which will cause other problems. The main contradiction is that the tasks available will be less, and the people who can perform them are more. He estimated that none of the major villagers implemented that into their system for the same reason. If that would greatly strengthen the national forces, they would have done it. In the former country, the Ninja Academy was established inside the Uzumaki village to allow the clansmen's kids to learn. Except for them, there were only 5 exchanged students from Konoha. Of course, in the past 3 years, 2 exchanged students have graduated, and another one will be soon. 3 years later, and I don't know what happened between Kushina and Minato. Masahiko whispered helplessly, let's hope that there was some progress. Great Elder, I got some news from Konoha. A patrol member appeared suddenly, interrupting Masahiko's thoughts. In the past 6 months, the patrol team's main task was guarding the Great Wall, and paying attention to the movement of Kirigakure. I know, Masahiko responded casually, then walked to the new Uzumaki residence. This one was different from the previous small village. The Uzumaki clan is not stationed in the same country as the civilians, but compared to them, their residence is closer to the daimyo palace, and the Uzumaki clansmen were treated now as the royal family of the land of Whirlpool. Speaking of the daimyo palace, Gensuke finally got what he wanted. He had a palace larger than the daimyo of the land of fire, and it was much more luxurious. Masahiko didn't stop him. In his view, Genzyuke's days as the daimyo are numerous, and the next daimyo will be Nagato. Of course, due to the fact that the hereditary system doesn't exist in the land of Whirlpool, it was more like the Masahiko appointment system. Walking to the new Patriarch Hall, Yuriko greeted him, "Sensei." Masahiko nodded, laughing. "Konoha asked for help again?" Yuriko smiled and shook her head. In the past 6 months, Konoha's fear of Takigakure attacking them didn't occur since the money was in the right place. Although Kakuzu didn't help them anymore, he still didn't stab them in the back. Amegakure withdrew its forces from that front and attacked Iwagakure, and the only enemies left were unexpectedly Kusagakure and Tsunagakure. However, they seem addicted to asking for help. Obviously, since Konoha entered the Land of Wind territory and almost reached Tsunagakure, they thought if Masahiko joins them, they won't suffer any losses. Since Konoha didn't ask for help, did something wrong happened? Yuriko sighed and said, "It's some new related to Sakumo. He has made a name of himself now after he beheaded the famous couples of puppet masters in Tsunagakure. He's known now as Konoha's White Fang." Masahiko got stunned. "That's supposed to happen in this war?" "Well, it hasn't changed." He was surprised, but he also felt that it was expected. Sakumo was an S-class ninja 4 or 5 years ago, it was about time people start talking about him. Masahiko glanced at the somewhat depressed Yuriko in front of him and smiled. "What, you're feeling a bit disappointed now that Sakumo didn't end up being your son-in-law?" Yuriko nodded. Masahiko felt helpless. Well, if Yuna married Sakumo, she wouldn't have given birth to Nagato. Such a talent he has will protect the clan for at least 60 years. Yuriko sighed, she was still feeling sad. Nagato's talent is indeed good, but that's all because of Yuna. Maybe if she married Sakumo, he would have been stronger. Masahiko laughed, "That's not necessary. And if that's the case, the kid would have ended up being a member of the Heitake clan." Yuriko nodded, then sighed with relief, "Well, that's true." Masahiko smiled, "It's okay. I'll tell Yuna about this and see how she will react." Yuriko couldn't stop herself from laughing. "Yuna will probably say that Tsunagakure shinobis are too stupid to let that white-haired guy defeat them." Masahiko's movements abruptly stagnated, feeling that Yuriko's words made a lot of sense, and suddenly lost the mood to tease Yuna. "Forget it, I'm not going anymore. Yuriko, you send a congratulation letter to Konoha's White Fang, and bring me a copy." That was truly something worth the praise. "Wait, forget about that, I'll go personally." Masahiko thought for a moment. He hasn't been in Konoha for a while, and Kushian should be in 3rd grade now. Masahiko was going to check on her feelings in person. Chapter 157, Good Show. "Great-grandpa, I don't want to go back, the war is over. I should stay here and practice." Noeki reluctantly said. Yes, the Second Shinobi World War is over. Yet it cannot be said that it was entirely over. Only the war between Konoha and Tsunagakure ended, after the latter surrendered. Tsunagakure lost a couple of talented puppet masters and other heavy losses in different aspects and finally collapsed. Sadly, Cho should be the hatred between ninjas is really difficult to resolve. Masahiko sighed, ignoring Noeki complaining aside. In order to prevent Noeki from going to the battlefield and give fake pain the opportunity to kill him, Masahiko ended up training Noeki for more than half a year. The current Noeki has mastered a lot of earth releases ninjutsu, hiding in rock technique, rock wall, earth substitute, hiding like a mole well, all were defensive and escaping ninjutsu. Masahiko felt that this was good for him. In the face of someone who can use the 6 paths of pain, it's better if he could defend or delay his death for a second, so Masahiko can maybe save him. Now that the war is over, Noeki was forced to follow Masahiko, who wants to see Sakumo, the hero who is being called now Konoha's White Fang. Therefore, after spending the new year with the clan, Masahiko took Noeki back to Konoha, with the latter still whining. "Stop it," Masahiko sighed, "compared to your sister, you're really stubborn." Noeki glanced sadly at Masahiko and didn't answer. After a while, Konoha was already in front of them, and the 2 gatekeepers greeted them. Masahiko took Noeki to the Senjo station. Briefly exchanged a few words with Mito, and learned that Kushina wasn't here. Therefore, he left Noeki there with her and then walked out to find Sakumo. The Heitake station was small, and there were probably only 20 or 30 chakra reactions inside. Like in the Warring States period, the clan wasn't prosperous. Masahiko didn't walk in directly. After all, he wasn't as familiar to them as the Senju, so he gave the word to the guards, and waited for Sakumo, who quickly came out. Let me congratulate you, Lord Konoha's White Fang. Before Sakumo could speak, Masahiko smiled. Sakumo smiled bitterly, Elder Masahiko, please don't make a joke of me. Masahiko shook his head, I won't. You're strong now, it has nothing to do with the title, if it were up to me it would be you who the people call the demigod. Masahiko was referring to Hanzo. In his opinion, Hanzo isn't necessarily stronger than Sakumo. Sakumo shook his head and invited Masahiko inside his house. A young woman appeared in front of Masahiko. Masahiko saw Sakumo's wife for the first time, but as soon as he met her, he was stunned. Sakumo's wife is also from the Heitake clan, she had a beautiful face and she was also talented in ninjutsu. Although there are not many clansmen in the Heitake clan, all of them were generally very good. The reason why Masahiko was stunned though wasn't because of this, but because he actually felt another breath of life inside Sakumo's wife. Masahiko froze for a moment, then turned to look at Sakumo with an incomprehensible expression, and said with a smile, Sakumo, you have just made a name of yourself, but both of you will hear another happy news in a few months. Sakumo felt puzzled, then glanced at his wife, who nodded at him. He immediately looked happy and ran to her, and the two started whispering and giggling. Masahiko didn't mind that, he just found a chair to sit on, and waited for Sakumo to come back again. About 10 minutes later, Sakumo came over with an excited look on his face. Did you think of a name for your son? Masahiko asked. Sakumo smiled, well, we don't know if it's a boy yet. Masahiko shook his head, it must be a son, let me give you a name, what about Heitake Kakekaru? Masahiko liked Kakashi, but this was an excellent opportunity to harvest some witness points. Sakumo hesitated, you want me to call him Kakekaru? Don't you think it's a bit sad? Masahiko was puzzled, why would it be sad? You said Kakekaru, right? If you add Heitake, it will mean a field of emptiness. Maybe Kakashi would be a bit better. A field of scarecrows. That's a bit cooler, isn't it? Masahiko twitched his mouth, he really didn't know what Kakashi meant. He thought secretly, but how can that be better? A field of scarecrows means that there will be unknown loneliness and pain in his life. Maybe that's why Kishimoto gave him that name. He lost his father at an early age, lost his teammates when he was a teenager, then lost his teacher. Masahiko felt speechless, just what kind of a father calls his son a scarecrow? Sakumo noticed Masahiko's strange gazes and wondered, Elder Masahiko, is there something wrong? Masahiko waved his hand, then gave him thumbs up, yeah, it's cool. Ignoring the confused expression of Sakumo, Masahiko left the Heitake clan. Wandering aimlessly in Konoha, Masahiko went to find Kushina. Because it is February, the academy was still on holiday. He didn't know where Kushina went, but he didn't want to fully open Kagura's mind eye every time he comes to Konoha, it has already caused them a lot of troubles before, so he chose to walk around and find her. But after wandering for an hour, Masahiko couldn't find her. Where did you go to play? Did you go to see Minato? Masahiko started daydreaming. Forget it, I'll go back to the Senju clan, Kushina will have to go back there in the end. Masahiko was about to turn around, then suddenly paused again. I wonder what Hiruzen is doing. I heard he finally developed his telescope technique. Is he peeping on the women's baths? Masahiko found a deserted place and then entered his Kagaya's will mode, hoping that he would get to have a good show in the hokage office and have some fun. After drilling underground, Masahiko wandered directly toward the hokage building. When it comes to concealing the presence, Black Zetsu was the best. Close to the building, Masahiko went up directly, then secretly peeked from the wall with his head out. The picture in front of him was really surprising. What's going on here? Masahiko glanced. Danzo was also there, and the two were standing next to each other. I can't see the crystal ball. Masahiko gathered his courage, then peeked out again. The two were still standing there. Masahiko observed them carefully, they seemed really focused on the crystal ball. Don't you dare to tell me that these two are peeping at the same time on the female baths? I didn't know Danzo was that kind of person. Masahiko's mind was telling him, no, but his body was honest, and he secretly turned around to get a better look at what inside the crystal ball. Unexpectedly, they were actually watching a ninja dressed in Kumagakure's uniform carrying a red-haired girl on his shoulder while being chased by a yellow-haired boy. Masahiko froze for a long time, then smiled bitterly, "You really gave me a good show." Chapter 158, The Handsome Hero. In the crystal ball, Minato finally caught up with Kumagakure's shinobi. And after several confrontations, he successfully defeated the other party and saved the beauty's future booty. This was Masahiko's imagination, not the booty but the entire scene. In fact, the reality wasn't that different, it's just that Minato didn't defeat the other guy, he chased him to the desert, but the latter escaped. If Minato couldn't catch up to him, then he should be a jonin. That kind of standards. Masahiko twitched his lips, watching that guy escaping in the crystal ball. However, Minato saved Kushina and finally said the words, "Because I didn't want to lose you." After she asked, "Why did you come this time? Although Kushina and Minato are finally together, why do I feel like I want to hit someone?" Masahiko sighed inside the wall while looking at Hiruzen and Danzo. "Mon, one day as a black man and I already hate you white people. As I thought, Kushina is suitable to be the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki, do you want to proceed with the plan?" The two start discussing the matter which Masahiko has already guessed. For a while, Hiruzen sighed, "Danzo, let's think about how to explain this to Elder Masahiko, I don't think we can hide it from him." Danzo frowned, "We can hide it for a while. We should wait until the two of them have a better relationship. Elder Masahiko cannot break them up after that, right? What if we can't hide it? Well, then we will." Danzo's words suddenly got cut short, feeling that something was wrong, and with a confused and pale expression, he turned his head stiffly. The question just now was asked by Masahiko. "Tell me, how are you planning to hide this from me?" Masahiko smiled wryly. Danzo restrained himself quickly, "Elder Masahiko, when did you come?" "Just now, a ninja from Kumagakure wanted to kidnap Uzumaki Kushina, but she was successfully rescued by her classmate Namikaze Minato." "Oh, is that so?" Masahiko nodded and smiled at Danzo. He didn't expect that he would still have the ability to talk nonsense while looking into his eyes. "What about the ninja from Kumagakure? Did you catch him?" Masahiko asked. Danzo frowned, then shook his head, "Unfortunately, he ran away." Masahiko glanced at Hiruzen and sighed, "You should strengthen the patrolling guard forces of the village, Hiruzen." Hiruzen kept nodding again and again. Masahiko didn't say much, he turned around and walked out. What they did actually helped him, so he didn't feel like pushing this topic forward anymore. However, he wasn't planning on letting this one slide. However, at the door, Masahiko turned around and said, "Kushina will never become the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki unless she volunteers." Throwing out this sentence, Masahiko left straight to see Kushina and Minato's situation regardless of the bitter smiles these two scheming foxes were having in the hokage office. The place in the crystal ball was familiar, it should be a forest in the southwest side of Konoha. Sure enough, when he reached the place, Masahiko sensed two chakra reactions there. He didn't hide and went straight toward them. The moment Kushin saw him, she rejoiced, but Minato's reaction was faster than her. "The fortune sticks, old man?" Masahiko's face turned pale. "What did he just call me?" "Grandpa!" Kushina shouted, then ran over. After listening to Kushina a bit, Masahiko turned his attention to Minato. When Kushina shouted "Grandpa," Minato's expression became weirder. "Are you Kushina's grandfather? Then you're Elder Uzumaki Masahiko?" The moment Masahiko nodded, Minato suddenly pondered. "The student exchange system," Minato whispered. Masahiko suddenly became embarrassed and started cursing Hiruzen inside his heart. Couldn't he give him any random reason? Why did he tell him that he was rejected because he's too girlish? Obviously, Masahiko was gonna blame someone else. What's the matter? "The approval of the exchanged students' applications is the responsibility of my disciple Uzumaki Yuriko, is there any problem?" Minato was stunned, and nodded, "Oh, well, but he certainly didn't believe him." Kushina looked left and right, then gently pushed Masahiko. "Grandpa, are you bullying Minato?" Masahiko reluctantly covered his forehead, feeling that he was quickly pushed out of the picture, but he was still happy to see this. "How is it possible?" Masahiko decisively denied. Then turned to Minato and asked the question seriously. "How did you know where to find Kushina when she got kidnapped?" Thinking about it, the kidnapper of Kushina this time should be a member of the Umbu. The strength is at least a jonin. He's on a different level from the Kumagakuer shinobi, who kidnapped her in the original, and he wouldn't give her the opportunity to use her hair as a tail. Minato froze for a moment and said, I was practicing there before, and the man passed right beside me carrying Kushina. Minato said, then frowned, obviously there was something wrong. Masahiko noticed Minato's contemplation, but he didn't explain. It's better if he didn't know anything about this or his plan of the handsome hero saving the beauty. It seems that Hiruzen and Danzo have really taken their time planning for this. Interesting. Masahiko shook his head. Let's go. In order to thank you for saving our Kushina, I will invite you to a barbecue. The two kids followed as Masahiko took them to the 30-years-old Akimichi restaurant. Unexpectedly, he found the legendary Sunin there. Old devil! Jiraiya shouted. Ignoring him, Masahiko smiled at Tsunade, who had messy eyes. What's wrong, who bothered our princess? Masahiko asked without waiting for Tsunade to speak, then he suddenly felt a cold chill on the back of his neck. He turned to find Orochimaru staring at him. Damn it, as expected, now that his parents are dead, he's more interested in researches. The moment Masahiko glared at him, Orochimaru lowered his head and said hoarsely, Elder, just now, that idiot has confessed his love to Tsunade for the first time. Masahiko froze for a moment, then smiled, and pointed at Jiraiya, with this appearance. Masahiko didn't finish his sentence, then he closed his eyes and shook his head, making Jiraiya even more miserable. Old devil, you! All right, Masahiko waved, since I'm here, I will treat you all to a meal. Only then the three noticed the two children behind Masahiko. Tsunade was naturally familiar with Kushina and greeted her with a smile. Minato looked at Jiraiya and Orochimaru and didn't feel like they were good people, so he sat down close to Masahiko. Old devil, watch me eat until you're poor. Masahiko shook his head helplessly. He was 25 years old, but he acts as if he didn't grow up a day since they first met. Wait, 25? Masahiko thought, isn't Tsunade 25 too? What happened to Kato? Is he dead? Well, she doesn't seem sad, so maybe she didn't meet him yet since Masahiko recalls that Kato died when Tsunade was 25 years old in the original. Is it because the course of the war is different? Masahiko couldn't remember when or how Tsunade fell in love with Kato. In this way, Jiraiya should have a chance. Masahiko then turned to Tsunade and wanted to ask, do you want to give him a chance? But upon seeing Jiraiya eating stupidity, he shook his head. Sorry, you're not handsome enough to save the beauty's current booty. Chapter 159, Treats for Old. Since then Jiraiya's face was red and sat on his seat feeling ashamed. Masahiko ate a lot that he barely managed to squeeze out a sentence. Tsunade Kushina, let's go. Tsunade smiled weirdly and walked out of the barbecue restaurant with the other. Masahiko took a sigh of relief. He could finally enjoy life. Maybe I was too harsh on him. Tsunade shook her head and smiled bitterly, then a scream came from behind. Old devil! Didn't you say it was your treat? Masahiko, who has gone far away, pouted, then muttered, not if you're eating that much. Masahiko felt that he had made a mistake when he invited these five, but in fact, the five of them together didn't eat as much as he did. Although he didn't lose much money thanks to Hashirama and Madara, it felt awkward. He should be the one getting treats at such an age. Tsunade, I've brought back Nawaki with me, don't you wanna see him? Tsunade paused for a moment, then nodded. Kushina, you wanna go back together? Grandpa, I'm going then. Kushina left with Tsunade, and Minato also took over, leaving Masahiko alone. Only Masahiko and Orochimaru were left there. Masahiko sighed helplessly, then said, if you look at me that way one more time, I swear to God that I will dig out your snake eyes out. Do you understand? Now, what do you want? Orochimaru shook his head, nothing. Elder, I have something to do, I'm leaving too. Wait, Masahiko stopped him, it's not wrong to pursue immortality. Everyone wants to live forever, everyone lost someone. If it's that important, pursue it, but don't lose yourself. Masahiko was talking about the Edo Tensei. It felt awkward to say such a thing with the others around. Orochimaru nodded, Elder, I'm not interested in immortality anymore. He then turned around, leaving Masahiko puzzled. He's not interested in immortality, then he's not interested in me anymore, right? Thinking of this, Masahiko felt creepy. The trip's object was finally completed. Masahiko's concerns about Kushina and Minato's relationship were resolved. Although it was determinate in a messy way, Masahiko managed to accept that. Nagato was more than 5 years old, and it was almost time for Masahiko to give him his shinobi enlightenment. Therefore, Masahiko planned to return to the land of whirlpools after talking to Mito. The work on the kunao cutting machine was a few steps before finally being finished, and the one shadow clone he left there can't do much. Just when he was about to say goodbye, Tsunade stopped him. "Great-grandpa, I have something to discuss with you." Masahiko nodded, straightforward, "What is it?" Tsunade hesitated, "Should I let Noeka sign a contract with the Katsuyu?" Masahiko froze for a moment, then smiled, "I have given you the scroll. If you want him to sign a contract you can do as you please. I didn't let him do it before, because he was too young to know how to use it. I've trained him for 6 months, and his work rate isn't bad. He might even pass the Chunin exam with some luck, so I feel he's ready to sign the contract. However, he's not ready yet to practice the Sage Mode." Speaking of this, Masahiko looked at Tsunade's forehead, and the diamond-shaped mark was already there. Not long ago, she finally learned the Yin Seal technique from Mito. "Speaking of the Sage Mode, you can try and practice it. After the war, I will send you to Shikotsu Forest, what do you think?" Masahiko also wanted to see how strong Tsunade will be if she successfully learns the Sage Mode. Tsunade hesitated, "Great-grandpa, is it okay if we delay it? I still have something to do in Konoha. I wanted to advocate the including of a medical ninja in every team before, but because of the fierce battle with Tsunagakuer, I never had the chance. Now that the war is over, I want to try and ask sensei." Masahiko frowned, what Tsunade said reminded him of the original. Tsunade wanted to include medical shinobi to every team, Hiruzen agreed, but he couldn't dedicate resources to the necessary implementation due to the ongoing war. However, only Kato truly supported her and shared her view, so the two eventually fell in love. "However, the timing is kind of wrong," Masahiko whispered, "why is it 2 years later than the original?" Not far away, Noeka came running. "Great-grandpa, I heard you're leaving?" The joy on his face couldn't be hidden. "Oh, Noeka!" Masahiko whispered. It was finally clear to him. In the original, Tsunade came up with that idea after Noeki's death. "Great-grandpa, are you really leaving?" Noeki asked again. Masahiko glanced at him feeling speechless. "You're happy that I'm leaving?" "Not like this!" Noeka shouted, then looked serious, "Can I go back with you?" Masahiko felt weird, what the hell did happen? Noeka raised his head solemnly, "Grandpa, please train me seriously." The look in his eyes froze Masahiko. "Are you okay? Did you eat bad chicken?" Noeka shook his head, "I fought against that damn Uchiha Fugaku again. Although I didn't win, I also didn't lose." Masahiko smiled helplessly, "Fugaku has become a Chunin 2 years ago." From the so-called no-loss no-win of Noeka, Masahiko could imagine exactly what happened. Using various defensive earth releases, Noeka literally broke the Sharingan. Of course, there's no chance for a Chunin to win against someone who has such a variety of defensive and escaping ninjutsu. Masahiko hesitated, then nodded, he had to train Nagato anyway, so he won't mind having Noeka tagging along with Nagato. "Okay, I will take you back in a few days." Masahiko promised, but he also decided to stay for a few more days and see if he could gain some witness points from Tsunade. So when Tsunade went to the hokage office to propose her idea, Masahiko followed. "Elder Masahiko, do you share with her the same opinion?" Unexpectedly Hiruzen asked Masahiko after he immediately heard what Tsunade had to say. Masahiko smiled, "In front of such a foxy wise hokage like you, how dare a grandpa like me to have an opinion?" Obviously he was still annoyed after what they did to Kushina. Hiruzen smiled bitterly, "Tsunade, I think this is a good idea, but it needs testing. Let's apply it on a few teams first. Because the war was basically over, a mistake here or there won't cost them any casualties." Therefore, Hiruzen didn't refuse. "But if this is going to work, you will need to train more medical shinobis, Tsunade. Just leave it to me." Tsunade nodded in confidence. "Well, you don't need to rush things up," Masahiko said, "it's estimated that there will be a long period of peace at the end of this war. So you can go to Shikotsu Forest first and practice the Sage Mode." Ever since he gave her that scroll, Masahiko felt that there was hope for Tsunade to learn the Sage Mode, so he couldn't wait any longer. Tsunade hesitated for a moment, and nodded, then sensei, I will have to go out for a while. Hiruzen was stunned, is it the kind of technique that the first hokage used? Masahiko nodded, do you want to learn it? Too bad, your old body won't withstand it. He said while shaking his head. Hiruzen smiled bitterly, feeling that he really offended Masahiko. Chapter 160, The Fourth Disciple. Masahiko stayed in Konoha for about half a month. By witnessing the hero saving the beauty, and Tsunade's proposal of adding medical ninja to every team, he earned 10 witness points from each one, which was fair enough. Before leaving, Masahiko sent Tsunade to Shikotsu Forest, where he found out that Tsunade had the standards of learning Sage Mode, which made him even happier. Thinking of it, I believe Tsunade will be stronger than what she was in the original. As for Orochimaru, Masahiko couldn't make the comparison, since he didn't know which part of Orochimaru's strength in the original belonged to him. He had an SSS-classed viability, what a shame, what a shame. Nawaki really followed Masahiko back to the Uzumaki country. It seems that competing with Fugaku to win Mikoto's heart has become his nindo. Note, nindo, literally meaning, ninja way, is a personal rule that each shinobi lives by. It is their way of ninja life, their motto, belief, or dream. Masahiko glanced at him with a smile, Nawaki, you're 15 years old, and Mikoto is also 14 years old, she will be married earlier than you. Nawaki shook his head, no, Mikoto said that she will wait for me to defeat Uchiha Fugaku. Masahiko's face became stiff, and he muttered, what should I do? Should I turn into Nawaki and rescue the captured Princess Mikoto from the evil hands of the Demon King Fugaku? Masahiko shook his head, feeling that he won't be convincing. Maybe kind-hearted Mikoto is just encouraging him, right? When they returned to the Uzumaki, Masahiko didn't go to find Nagato right away. In his mind, there was a more important thing to do. Yuna, how are the researches on the kunao cutting machine? When he opened the door, Masahiko found that Yuna was still busy. When she saw Masahiko, Yuna froze for a moment, then looked at the other Masahiko beside her. Grandpa, you actually fooled me by this shadow clone. Yuna shouted. Masahiko's face stiffened, then he smiled weirdly. When he released the shadow clone, the information came to him, then he sighed, failed? Yuna shook her head, it didn't fail, Grandpa. But I couldn't improve its accuracy. However, with chakra, the accuracy will get better. As long as the user is a Chunin, it generally won't miss the target. Masahiko nodded, feeling sad. In this world where chakra is the mainstream, there is no way to develop a device that doesn't require chakra at all. Although it can be mass-produced, the civilians will not be able to participate. Although Masahiko has forgotten all about the economic knowledge he learned from his previous life, he still knows that the country can be strong if civilians have a stable income source. For that reason, he proposed to build such a machine, but he ended up failing. Yuna noticed how Masahiko looked disappointed, then smiled and shook her head, Grandpa, it's not completely impossible, I will try again. Masahiko nodded, there shouldn't be anything else I can help with, so let me take care of Nagato. Yuna was surprised, then she smiled, Nagato is also 5 years old, and it's indeed time to start practicing. Masahiko waved his hand, then turned and walked heading toward Yuriko. During this time, Yuna and her husband were very busy, and Nagato spent most of the time with Yuriko. Sure enough, when he came to the Patriarch Hall, he found Nagato sitting beside Yuriko, who seemed busy. Sensei, you're back. Masahiko nodded with a smile. And since I came back, Nagato will officially become your little brother. Sensei. Are you really going to accept him as your disciple? Over the years, Masahiko has taught many people, Suzuki Sarutobi, Takeshi Shimura, Kushina, Nawaki, the Hyuga brother, but Masahiko has only recognized Yuriko, Nanako, Kanikiro as his disciples, and now he added Nagato. Masahiko nodded and looked at Nagato, who was still an ignorant kid. This boy is very talented. His talent cannot be wasted. Therefore, I'm going to accept him as my fourth disciple. All of a sudden, Yuriko widened her eyes, and her face looked really strange. You're not teaching him to be like Kanikiro, right? Masahiko turned pale, and he didn't know if he should laugh or cry. Indeed, out of his 3 disciples, 2 girls grew to be okay, one majored in Fuinjutsu, and the other in ninjutsu. But the boy who was majored in taijutsu grew up to be a big idiot. Don't worry. Although the three of you are talented, you could only walk one road. But Nagato is different. My hope for him is to inherit all my ninjutsu, taijutsu techniques, and foinjutsu. Yuriko hesitated. Ninjutsu and foinjutsu should be enough. Masahiko glared. How can a true ninja lack an aspect? Look at you, although you're strong, you could never become one of the strongest shinobi in the world. Masahiko thought he was trashing her, but he realized that he was trashing his own teaching methods. After a moment of pure silence, he said a few words to Nagato, then took him out. The first step of the ninja enlightenment, after knowing the history of the ninja world, is controlling chakra. As for history, it wasn't really important in Masahiko's opinion. Because he can shamelessly say that he was a living history book of the shinobi world. Therefore, Masahiko was planning to pass his own glorious history on the way while teaching Nagato. In short, the first step was refining chakra. As for the method he was going to use to teach Nagato, Masahiko didn't really have anything special, or in other words, the entire shinobi world didn't come up with any special method. However, that has only proved that Nagato's talent is really high. Using the same old method, he managed to successfully his chakra in 10 minutes. As for what 10 minutes means on the scale of geniuses, the old grandpa, in front of Nagato, who regards himself as a genius, took him 10 hours to control his chakra the first time. Without using chakra test papers, Masahiko could perceive the kind of chakra nature Nagato had just by using his ability. After leveling up his yin release to LV9, Masahiko's Kagura mind's eye has also improved. Wind, earth, and fire? What a coincidence! Masahiko secretly whispered, although Nagato, who didn't have the Rinnegan, wasn't born with all 5 releases, it was just right, the 3 chakra natures he had by birth were the same as Masahiko's. In this way, it would be best to train him according to my childhood practice methods. Masahiko whispered, moreover, wind, earth, and fire will help him learn how to use the dust release. After thinking of it, Masahiko sighed again, but I can only hope that he has the talent for it in himself. Masahiko's success in learning the dust release was entirely due to the system. He can only describe it roughly, and cannot teach it to others. Therefore, Yuriko couldn't learn it too. From today, I will officially accept you as my 4th disciple. Masahiko looked at Nagato and said with a smile. Little Nagato was somewhat introverted and only promised. Masahiko was stunned as a line of Chinese characters suddenly popped before him. Witness and completely change the side story of Naruto World, teacher of Nagato. Reward, 10, *10, witness points. Is that also okay? Masahiko was shocked and overjoyed. If that's the case, then maybe I should accept a 5th or even 6th disciple. Chapter 161, Konan. Fire Release, Great Fire Annihilation. A slightly soft voice emitted, and the raging flames rushed towards Masahiko, but when it was about to connect, it split into 2 rows directly, passing by both sides. It's good, Masahiko said while smiling, and Nagato, who was breathless. It has been 2 years since Masahiko accepted Nagato as a disciple, and Nagato's amazing talent was fully revealed. At only 7.5 years old, he can skillfully use this A-class fire release. If it wasn't for his young age, his small amount of chakra, plus his lack of experience, he would have been rated as Jonin. But even so, he makes a good Chunin. Of course, if Kakashi, if Kakeru could be a Chunin at the age of 6, Nagato wouldn't be worse than him. Masahiko felt proud. 2 years later, Kakashi was born, and Sakumo really listened to Masahiko's suggestion and named him Kakeru. Masahiko feels weird every time he says his name. Sensei, has brother Noeki gone back? Nagato took a breath and asked. Masahiko smiled, Noeki has a really messed up life. Your brother Noeki went to claim his wife. Noeki trained with him again for 2 years, and he made a lot of progress. 2 years ago, he was just a special Jonin, but now he can be regarded as Jonin, and there is also his defensive specialty. The 17-year-old Noeki has matured due to love reasons, but that only made him improve faster than before. Of course, Masahiko didn't dare to let Noeki return by himself. He separated a shadow clone to escort Noeki and Sarutobi Shinosuke, who graduated from the Uzumaki Ninja Academy. Although the Akatsuki hasn't moved much in recent years, Masahiko will not just ignore them. How does brother Noeki's wife looks like? Nagato has been practicing with Noeki in the past 2 years, and the latter has been really kind to him. At this time, it seemed that Nagato was a little curious. Not necessarily his wife. Maybe if we catch up to him, I will show her to you. But more importantly, how about I take you out to find your wife? Masahiko laughed. Nagato blushed and didn't answer. Masahiko actually wasn't kidding. 2 years ago, he accepted Nagato as a disciple and gained a full of 100 witness points, which made him more interested in having other disciples. With having Nagato, Masahiko's first sight was Yahiko and Konan in a Megakure. Unlike the original story, due to Masahiko's influence, the course of the war has completely changed, and Konoha retired from the battlefield early. Using his peeping ninja skills, Jiraiya heard that Tsunade began practicing her sage mode in Shikotsu Forest, so he went to Mount Miyaboku as well, thus, he didn't meet Yahiko and Konan in a Megakure. Although these two kids aren't as important as Nagato, I feel that I might get another 100 witness points from them combined. This is a must-do. Masahiko muttered, ready to move. It was just because he didn't know where these were exactly. Otherwise, he would have gone for them a while ago, but now was about time. Let's go, Nagato, I will take you to a Megakure. Nagato followed Masahiko, then said their farewells to Yuriko, and left. Since Nagato was less than 5 years old when he was first brought to the Uzumaki clan, and never left it again, his memories about his early days were basically blurred. Therefore, this time when he left the village with Masahiko, everything was new to him. To satisfy his curiosity, Masahiko didn't fly him through the sky, and the two ran all the way for 3 days until they finally reached a Megakure. Let's go, I'll take you to see your former house first. Masahiko said with a smile. The master and his disciple walked all the way through the land of rain that hasn't changed much, still as chaotic as before. The slum area that was completely destroyed by Masahiko 3 years ago was rebuilt. Masahiko's gravity technique wasn't as strong as the true Shinra Tensei, and he could also control it in a certain direction. At that time, the main target was Black Zetsu. Of course, it was impossible not to damage other places, which was the case for half of this small slum area. Masahiko was still feeling guilty, but to seal Black Zetsu, he had to do everything. It's estimated that these poor people have worked really hard for 3 years to rebuild the houses. But why did they have to build it the same old way? Masahiko looked around and felt that the place looked the same way the last time he visited. Even Yuna's house was there, but some other people already took it over. After he let Nagato took a final look at his old house, the two headed toward the relatively prosperous area of the Land of Rain. If you're looking for vagrants, you won't find them in slums. If they stay here, they will starve to death. Of course, this is only a relatively prosperous place. They wouldn't let them in the village, which is the exclusive territory of Hanzo. By the way, do you want to say hello to Uncle Demigod? Masahiko snickered and thought of Hanzo's expression before when he saw that star Masahiko created in the sky. But in the end, he decided to save it for another time. Bun shop. In the civilian area, Masahiko found a bun shop following the smell of it. Looking at the top of his head, Masahiko's face went dark. Damn you, Land of Rain, what did you to son? It's noon, did you eat the damn thing? Masahiko was still focusing on the weather when Nagato suddenly pulled his sleeve, pointing to a blue-haired girl hiding not far behind the owner of the bun shop. Masahiko was startled. Konan? Isn't this too easy? Then Yahiko shouldn't be far away, right? The success of the trip far exceeded Masahiko's expectations. He thought it would be very difficult to find 2 children with no chakra. He never imagined it to be this easy. Masahiko looked around. Since Konan appeared here, then Yahiko should also be nearby. Since she was exposing herself this way, she should be working as a decoy for Yahiko to steam the buns. However, things developed beyond Masahiko's expectations again. Konan actually moved quickly, then took 2 buns and fled. Dirty kid, it's you again, stop. The owner shouted at the Konan and started chasing her, and Masahiko frowned on the side. Yahiko is really not a gentleman, he let the girl do all the work. Then he glanced at Nagato and winked twice. Boy, it's time for the hero to save the beauty. The boss of the bun shop is just an ordinary civilian, try not to hurt him. Obviously, little Nagato didn't understand what it meant to be a hero and save the beauty. He saved Konan, who was about to be overtaken ignorantly, and didn't know how to embody the heroic spirit. For example, he should have held Konan in the air, and the two then would have exchanged glances at each other, or he should have neatly and quickly knocked down the boss, then do a cool pose in front of him or something. Well, regardless, this trip went smoothly. Masahiko looked at the two children emotionally. Chapter 162, the fifth. This trip really didn't go so smoothly. Masahiko sighed and shook his head. He learned later from little Konan that she started wandering in a megakura about a year ago and has been alone since then. Isn't it about time for the two to meet? Masahiko murmured. In fact, Masahiko didn't particularly care about Yahiko. After all, he didn't matter in the original story. He just appeared in Nagato's memories as a deceased character. Also, he wasn't a beauty like Konan. Although sometimes people aren't important, the witness points that Masahiko might get from them were critical. The beginning of the original story was getting closer and closer. Although Masahiko is already the stronger shinobi alive, the great sage Toad's prophecy made him a little concerned. He wants to level up all of his 7 attributes to LV9 as soon as possible. Moreover, he had been looking forward to doing it for a long time. Sensei, can we bring her? Nagato didn't know that the purpose of this trip is to find Konan and Yahiko. Masahiko smiled at Konan warily and nodded. But soft little girls aren't what he is good at. This can be clarified from the fact that he made Yuriko cry a lot of times when she was a little girl. He could only rely on Nagato to appease Konan. It may be because the two were at the same age, or because Nagato saved her, but Konan quickly settled and let loose of her vigilance. Thank you, uncle. Masahiko was stunned by the way Konan addressed him. Then he remembered that 23 years have passed since he rescued Tobirama, and since then, he has been losing 1 year every year. Now he looks only as an uncle, and no one who didn't know him would call him a grandpa. I haven't used the transformation technique to cover up my appearance. I guess many people started asking questions again, Masahiko murmured, then shook his head. Well, I don't care anymore. Masahiko didn't care too much. At first, he concealed it because it was difficult to explain to his clansmen and acquaintances, and he feared that other people will seek the answers for his immortality. Now he's not afraid of anyone. Also, it's gonna be fun. Looking at Konan in front of him, Masahiko shook his head. You call me sensei, like Nagato here. And I will teach you ninjutsu. Konan was surprised. Can I also be a ninja? She froze for a moment, then quickly replied, thank you, sensei. At the same time, a message from the system appeared in front of him, and he gained 50 witness points. Sure enough, accepting Konan as a disciple has also yielded me witness points, but it's a bit less than Nagato. It seems that I will still have to find Yahiko, even if it's only 20 or 30, it's not a complete loss. Masahiko sighed. Poverty made him lose his principles. Nagato, Konan, let's go to a megakura again. The two of them became 3. The newcomer was a girl who never practiced ninjutsu yet, and the movement was much slower. However, the Land of Rain wasn't really big, similar to the Land of Whirlpools in the past. Going around the country several times, Masahiko covered all the streets and alleys. Still, there was no trace for Yahiko. Maybe he didn't become an orphan yet? No, he should be at this age. Masahiko muttered, leading the two of them to a place he never looked into, the center of the Land of Rain. Sensei, that place is the residence of Hanzo. Konan hesitated to speak. When Nagato left this country, he was still young and didn't know much about these things. Konan, on the other hand, who has been wandering in the Land of Rain for more than a year, has heard a lot about Hanzo. Masahiko waved his hand. It's okay, they won't see us. In fact, he knew that Yahiko wouldn't be here, but when he came to the Land of Rain, finding Yahiko and Konan wasn't his ultimate goal. When he reached the place, he obviously found more guards there. In order to prevent the rain, the buildings here were thin and pointed, and their roads were even lightened. Interesting. I didn't pay attention to this before, but there's such a thing in the Land of Rain, but none in the Land of Thunder. The 3 of them walked all the way, and guards automatically ignored them. After wandering around in Hanzo's home, Masahiko didn't find Yahiko, yet he satisfied his curiosity. Hanzo has a collection of a lot of swords. He turned out to be a swords collector. Masahiko looked left and right, then his face suddenly turned pale. Hello there, what a coincidence, demigod-sama. Masahiko didn't know when Hanzo came so close to them, watching the three of them calmly. Masahiko was watching the swords and didn't pay attention to his surroundings. It's a coincidence, Masahiko Dono, I didn't expect to meet you at my house, Hanzo said sarcastically. Masahiko's face turned dark, then patted Kanan's shoulder, who looked extremely afraid and shook his head with a smile. Don't be afraid, Hanzo is a good person. He almost laughed, saying this. Nagato wasn't afraid at all and looked at Hanzo curiously. Elder, are you interested in my swords? Hanzo continued to speak. Masahiko nodded and said, I have used a sword before. But this time, I didn't come for one, I wanted to check if you had any accidents. This was the true purpose of coming to Hanzo's residence. Since that weird Akatsuki group is constantly trying to revise the plot, they may also choose its base camp in the Land of Rain. Unfortunately, Masahiko didn't find any traces from them here. It's none of your concerns, Elder Hanzo spoke slowly, and it seems that he already began to lose his patience. Masahiko smiled, not caring about that, it's okay, I'll leave first, you demigod must be careful not to be killed by any strange enemies. Masahiko had some assessment for fake pain's strength. Mito repulsed him, which proves that he was slightly weaker than her, then he should be stronger than Hanzo, but the gap shouldn't be big too. As long as Hanzo is careful, escaping is still possible. However, Hanzo obviously didn't take Masahiko's words seriously, he just nodded perfunctorily, and then looked like he was seeing guests off. Masahiko didn't care too, it just happened that he gave him a bit of advice on the way while looking for Yahiko, it doesn't matter whether he listens or not. Masahiko, who left with the two kids, pondered, since theory trying to revise the plot, they wouldn't change the location of their base camp. It will still be the Land of Rain. Maybe it wasn't just the right time. Yahiko died when he was 20 years old in the original, and according to Nagato's age now, it will probably happen in Konoha's 49th or 50th. When that time comes, I will visit again. Full of thoughts, Masahiko returned to the Land of Whirlpool with the two kids. Chapter 163, Suddenly Rich. Gentle Fist LV9, 5 million. The long-lost feeling of becoming stronger flashed again in Masahiko's heart, which made him smile in satisfaction. This was the first skill he had trained to LV9 without distributing any points. However, reaching that level didn't bring him the benefits he imagined, it only increased his body stat by more than 500 points, which made him a little disappointed. It might be because the 9th level of the Yang attribute has added too many points to his body stat. Masahiko shook his head again and again, I'm getting greedy, 500 points is also an improvement that isn't bad. And there is also one level left, and there's no limit to it, I might be the first person to ever level up the Gentle Fist to the max LV. While he was pondering, a crisp girly voice came, Sensei. Masahiko was startled, then turned over with a smile. This was Masahiko's fifth disciple, Konan. It has been 2 months since Masahiko brought her here. Now she's no longer that of a little beggar, her clothes were much fine, and she looked lively again. Although she isn't a clansman member of the Uzumaki, she was accepted as Masahiko's disciple, and she naturally became the little princess of the Uzumaki. What's the matter? Did you encounter a problem in practicing that Nagato couldn't solve? Masahiko said. For 2 months, Masahiko taught Kona some basic ninjutsu knowledge and then threw her to Nagato. It's not that Masahiko didn't care, but the basic training of chakra controlling and the 3 body techniques were also useful for Nagato, so he asked them to train together. No, sensei. Konan shook her head and pulled out a flower paper from her hair. Masahiko was surprised. He felt that something seemed different about her today, and it turned out that she had a flower paper on her hair. I forgot about that, Konan is a paper jutsu user, Masahiko muttered. Sensei, look. Konan mobilized her chakra slightly, and the paper flower in her hand slowly unfolded and turned into several pieces of paper. Oh! Masahiko showed a look of interest. He has seen a lot, but such a peculiar technique is unheard of. Can you fold it back? Masahiko opened his perceiving ability as he wanted to explore the truth behind the paper ninjutsu. Konan nodded, and Masahiko's face became solemn, and instantly the paper started moving and folded back. Nature transformation? Masahiko frowned. He only sensed the fluctuations of the earth release on that paper, so it wasn't a Kekii Genkai. It should also be the same case as Kushina's natural ability to suppress the Baijuyu, with her special chakra. Masahiko smiled but also felt a bit disappointed. Although the dance of the Shikigami is special, it was more novel and unknown than ordinary earth release. Sensei, I can also add another chakra nature. Konoha's words shocked Masahiko. Let me see, if that's the case, then this can be regarded as a Kekii Genkai. Masahiko seemed interested again. Konan hesitated, if I do so, it will explode. Is that so? Masahiko raised his eyebrows, remembering that Konan has also had the fire and water release. So adding fire will make it explode? The paper explodes when she adds fire. This word is really unscientific. It's okay, just add it then throw it at me. Konan followed his orders, and a piece of paper flew towards Masahiko. Masahiko immediately wrapped in a light blue crystal. This was a smaller version of the four violet flames formation. The size was reduced, but the defensive power was still the same. Masahiko felt that this technique should be enough. The small-sized four violet flames formation wrapped the paper in, then Masahiko pressed his hand to the side to feel its power. The paper exploded but didn't break the sealing technique, and Masahiko retracted his hand. So it's as strong as an explosive tag? That's pretty good, Masahiko muttered, then widened his eyes. If so, then isn't Konan is already a living explosive tag machine? Konan, can you prevent the paper from exploding? Masahiko asked. Konan nodded, I've tried that before, but I can only do it for 10 minutes. That's enough. It would improve in the future. Masahiko was delighted, make another one. Masahiko took the paper that could explode at any time. Konan was very nervous, so he looked at her and smiled, it's okay, the explosion won't hurt sensei. Boom. Masahiko. After finally washing the black stains off his face and hands, Masahiko turned at the ashamed Konan helplessly. Hi, I almost died. Did you want to see if sensei was bragging? Masahiko laughed. Konan smiled embarrassedly, then made a new paper. Masahiko took it, seal. Using the most basic seal technique, the chakra inside the paper calmed down. Well, you don't need to continue controlling it, Masahiko said. Konan lifted her control, the paper didn't explode as expected. Good. Masahiko's excitement couldn't be hidden. Now just by releasing the seal, the paper will explode. It's a ready-made explosive tag. Anyone clansman can use it easily. Moreover, this is costs much lower than the explosive tags. Masahiko rejoiced, feeling that the Uzumaki country has suddenly become rich. Looking at Konan again, his eyes flashed with creepy colors. However, Konan isn't strong enough. These explosive papers cannot be mass-produced. Masahiko calmed again. In addition, this ability must also be kept secret. This girl has become too important for the country. It's simply as accepting a god of wealth and fortune as a disciple. Thinking of this, Kakuzu was working his butt off to collect money in the original, and still didn't think of using Konan's ability. Masahiko murmured, then glanced at Konan. However, this shouldn't delay her ninjutsu training. Once she gets stronger, the number of the explosive papers she can produce will increase, as the lethality. If she can do 100,000 no, 1 million or more, I'm afraid that even I will have to defend myself or get injured. Masahiko couldn't remember at the time. In the original, Konan used 600 billion explosive papers to guard Nagato's body from Obito. If the latter didn't use Izanagi, the story would have ended there. Sensei? Masahiko was pondering since he sealed the explosive paper, and Konan's soft voice woke him up. Masahiko smiled and looked at Konan, you need to train harder, you may be more important to the Uzumaki country than Nagato. However, Konan was an ignorant 7-year-old girl who still didn't understand what her ability meant. Your ability is amazing, but you need to use it as a trap card. You should only use it in a sneak attack when encountering enemies. Masahiko explained. Seeing how Konan nodded, he continued, let's go to the training ground together and see Nagato's progress. The Uzumaki country was suddenly rich, and since Masahiko was in a good mood, he felt like walking. Chapter 164, Expanding the Ninjutsu Library. In front of Konoha's gate, Masahiko greeted the 2 guard keepers, then walked into the village. He originally wanted to teach his disciples without any disturbance back in the Uzumaki clan, but he got distracted by a letter from Hiruzen, saying that Konoha's ninjutsu library is about to be supplemented for the third time. The first time was when Konoha was founded. The clans gathered all non-secret ninjutsu and formed Konoha's ninjutsu library. As for the second, it was hosted at the end of the First Shinobi World War. In addition to supplementing a few newly ninjutsu, they collected most of the secret and forbidden ninjutsu and recoded them into the Scroll of Seals. At the time, Masahiko spent all of his days in seclusion at the Uzumaki clan, so he didn't have a chance to participate. It's actually going to be supplemented for the third time. It seems that a lot of ninjutsu were collected in the Second Shinobi World War. Masahiko came alone, and didn't bring his two newly acquired Pokem disciples. Konan's basic ninjutsu course hasn't been completed yet. After all, she has only started practicing less than 3 months ago. This time, Masahiko didn't even think of going to the Senjo station and went straight to the Hokage building, yet he also didn't sneak his way in. "Elder Masahiko, you're here." Hiruzen greeted him at the door. Masahiko nodded and glanced inside the room. "What about the others?" He was referring to the other 3 elders. "They have gone to various tribes to collect ninjutsu," Hiruzen responded. "Every tribe?" Masahiko frowned. "The secrets techniques of each clan should have already been recorded last time." "Yes, there have been a lot of seizures during this war, and every clan had its own spoils." Hiruzen's response stunned Masahiko. "Usually, all the loots are uniformly distributed. Why did they use such a method?" Masahiko pondered for a moment, then he realized that Hiruzen should have done this deliberately. This way, the clans will have to work harder if they want to get a share. So the plan was to make them pay with blood for war spoils and then use the Scroll of Seal as an excuse to collect those spoils again. For a hesitant person, this is really surprising from Hiruzen, or maybe it was Danzo's idea. Masahiko thought but didn't ask. This had nothing to do with him. From the moment he entered the room, Masahiko's eyes were locked on a book at the Hokage's desk. Ninjutsu Encyclopedia. Masahiko didn't know that there was such a thing, and out of curiosity, he opened it. It's just a ninjutsu catalog, but the size is surprisingly big. The book only lists the names of various ninjutsu with no specific practice method, but it was still a thick book. At the beginning of Konoha's establishment, Hashirama collected a lot of ninjutsu from various clans. However, Masahiko didn't practice a lot of them, because the number of technique he was mastering back then was more than 200, and now even more, which made the ninjutsu collection of the Uzumaki clan very rich. Fire Release, 202, Lighting Release, 94, Earth Release, 157, Wind Release, 207. Where did all of this come from? Masahiko frowned. He could understand the numbers of the fire release. After all, the Uchiha clan nature release is fire, but when Masahiko checked the wind release, he found a lot of ninjutsu that he has never seen before. Damn it, the twin rays non too. All these various ninjutsu made Masahiko a bit embarrassed. Hiruzen smiled and replied, "These are the ninjutsu I developed based on your rays non." "I thought it was Danzo." Masahiko murmured. Hiruzen seems to be thinking the same way as Naruto in the original. If one rays non cannot solve the problem, then more will do it. Water Release, 42. Masahiko was startled. Why are there only a few water releases? I remember that Tobirama has developed a lot. Hiruzen smiled bitterly. Yeah, most of Tobirama-sensei's techniques are included there, but only a few are ordinary techniques. Masahiko nodded, then read all of them, ignoring the numbers. About half of them are ninjutsu that I haven't mastered. I really underestimated these tribes. Masahiko originally thought that he had mastered most of the techniques after more than 100 years of being alive. Masahiko looked at Hiruzen. It is okay for me to copy these common ninjutsu, right? Masahiko didn't ask for the secret ninjutsu. He basically had no need for these ninjutsu, and it was very difficult to teach for others. Hiruzen nodded again and again. No problem, but I also hope that you will help to add a few there. This time, I'm hoping that we will eventually collect thousands of ninjutsu. Masahiko scoffed. Thousands? Dude, the anime had like less than 100. What? Ah. Nothing, Masahiko pondered. Why did they only use a few in the original? Didn't they say that Kakashi copied thousands of ninjutsu in the war? I thought it was an exaggeration. Masahiko didn't respond after that and kept looking at the encyclopedia of ninjutsu, while Hiruzen waited anxiously. About half an hour later, Masahiko sighed with relief. there are only 720 ninjutsu now? It took me a lot of time to count them all. Hiruzen smiled bitterly, feeling that Masahiko seemed glad that they didn't reach 1000. Hey, what a pity, only 280 ninjutsu are left, right? Even with more help, I can only give you a dozen water releases, which I've previously seized from Kirigakure. Hiruzen hesitated. What about the advanced type of the Raise Non, and the Thunder Ninjutsu you've taught your disciple Uzumaki Kanikiro? Masahiko was startled, then squinted his eyes looking at Hiruzen in front of him. No wonder he rushed to find him the moment he thought of adding more ninjutsu to Konoha's library. It turned out that he was eyeing his unique ninjutsu. I can give you the Chidori. Just like the Raise Non, it's just the basic form of the technique, and it has other advanced forms. However, the other advanced ninjutsu are all S-class secret techniques, use some ordinary jutsu is a fair price. Masahiko looked at Hiruzen with a smile. Hiruzen gritted his teeth. In addition to the secret techniques of each clan, you can also take a copy of the other ninjutsu in the Scroll of Seals. Masahiko waved his hand. I have read the Scroll of Seals, and I basically know all the ninjutsu's training methods. It's impossible that Masahiko, the person he came up with the idea of creating the Scroll of Seals, would have read it. He also remembers the wood release techniques and every forbidden technique created by Tobirama. If it weren't for the space attribute that has never appeared in his attribute bar, he would have used the Flying Thunder God. Hiruzen frowned, thinking about what he could offer as an exchange. I have also developed a lot of new ninjutsu over the years. There are about 100 kinds of techniques. If you want, you can have them all. Masahiko was shocked. Developing 100 types of ninjutsu is kind of astonishing. This is the collection of the professor's wisdom. No wonder Hiruzen was called the professor, and even the god of shinobi. Masahiko suddenly became interested in this trade. Most of the ninjutsu developed by Hiruzen weren't original, it was a try to modify the predecessor's ninjutsu and create other combinations, which brought a lot of new ideas to Masahiko. Although I can't use them, they will be useful in case Nagato couldn't learn the dust release, I can teach him these. In the end, Masahiko sent out a series of Chidori's forms to Konoha, the Raisin Shuriken wasn't included. After all, no could use it except Tsunade and Jiraiya, who had practiced Senjutsu. Finally, with the ninjutsu collected by the three elders, the number of techniques reached 1000, and Konoha's third ninjutsu library expansion was completed. Chapter 165, Sparing Time for the Disciples. After completing the extending of the Konoha ninjutsu library, Masahiko copied all the ninjutsu and brought it back to the Uzumaki. After checking, the Uzumaki's collection of ninjutsu has increased by several hundred, and eventually, it has even exceeded Konoha's collection of ninjutsu. After all, Konoha didn't obtain all of the Uzumaki sealing techniques. The Uzumaki followed Konoha's footsteps and expended the ninjutsu library once before. Unlike Konoha, you must complete a certain number of tasks or make some contributions to obtain new ninjutsu. The Uzumaki library is completely open, but there are restrictions on the numbers. For example, a genin can only learn 5 types of C-class ninjutsu, while a chunin can learn 5 types of B-class plus 10 types of C-class, and so on. Moreover, teaching ninjutsu isn't allowed unless it's within a master-disciple relationship that has been formally established. This way, on the one hand, they can avoid leaking any secret technique, and on the other, it will also help the ninja focus on developing and refining their skills. As for the sealing techniques, it's even stricter. If you want to join the Fuinjutsu class, you must go through a lot of reviews, and finally get judged by Yuriko or Masahiko personally. And it's even more difficult for a regular ninja to get his hands on a sealing technique. In addition, to become a jonin, he has to pass various difficult tests. Originally, teaching Fuinjutsu wasn't too strict, but the situation is different now. Fuinjutsu is coveted by too many villages, and after Masahiko's LV9 Fuinjutsu, many easy-to-master sealing techniques were developed. And in order to prevent its spreading, they can only increase the learning requirements. It took Masahiko more than a month to sort out the new ninjutsu. Only then he had some time to spare for his 2 disciples. Sensei! When they came to the training ground, the shouts of the 2 kids came. Masahiko has been busy during this time, but they never stopped practicing. Masahiko smiled, show me what you learned. Sensei, I have completed the basic training, Konan said while lowering her head. During this time, Konan only worked on improving her chakra control, practicing the 3 basic techniques, and the kunai throwing techniques. Watching Nagato every day practicing his various earth releases, she felt envious. Masahiko nodded, good, sharpening your skills in only 3 months is good. However, some people took them 6 years to master it. Hey, what an idiot, the 2 kids murmured, since both mastered it in 2 or 3 months. Unfortunately, that idiot has been born yet. The 2 children rolled their eyes at the same time. However, Masahiko was really telling the truth. Although he believed Konan, Masahiko had to check by himself. Feeling that your sensei really cares about you is good for the development of the disciple. Well, the 3 basics technique is well mastered, but the kunai throwing technique still needed to be practiced. Sometimes, a bit of lack will cause a disadvantage in a battle. Konan's kunai throwing technique, in fact, is very accurate, with 97 out of 100 hitting the center, but Masahiko wants her to pay more attention to the basics. In his view, if the strength and quality of the ninjas are equal, the basics will ultimately determine for whom the upper hand will be. Masahiko pondered for a moment. Since Konan nature transformations include wind, water, earth, and yang release, then there's no need to teach using the normal methods of ninjutsu practicing. Konan, I can't give you much guidance in terms of ninjutsu. You're different from Nagato. Since you have nature transformations, you should think of something in that aspect. Masahiko said, and I'll be here to give you some ideas. Masahiko remembers a lot of ninjutsu that Konan has used in the original, and he was planning on shamelessly claiming it as his original ideas. I don't need to say much about the paper shuriken. You've already come up with that on your own. The ability to make the paper explode is also good. You need to sharpen your chakra control though, to make the explosions more controllable. I will teach you medical ninjutsu later. It's the best way to be proficient in chakra control. In addition to this, you should try to enhance your paper manipulation even more. Eventually, you will have to be able to fold and splice millions of papers. Someday, you will be able to use paper to make wings and achieve the effect of flying. When she heard that sentence, Konan's widened her eyes. Sensei, will I be able to fly by myself soon? Masahiko's face stiffened. Well, you must work hard. When you're as half proficient as me, you will be the first disciple of mine to ever fly. Then glanced at Nagato. After all, Nagato's progress wasn't so fast, and he needed some pushing. But Nagato didn't seem to be caring about any of that and looked at Konan enviously. Besides, Masahiko continued, Konan, your explosive tags doesn't consume a lot of chakra. You should think of a way to increase the quantity. However, quantity shouldn't affect the quality. And remember, that using such a technique effectively will require restraining the enemy, so you should think of a technique for that. Masahiko shared a few ideas, then left Konan with a thoughtful expression, pulled Nagato, and walked aside. Have you mastered all the fire and earth releases that I've shown you? Masahiko asked. Nagato nodded, yes, sensei. Masahiko nodded with satisfaction but didn't check them all one by one. Because they were 4 or 5 techniques for each release, and Nagato has been practicing them for 3 months, unless he was careless, it's unlikely that he hasn't mastered them all. Your chakra volume is enormous. So next, I will teach you Shadow Clone, it will help you practice faster. Masahiko frowned suddenly, feeling a familiar chakra approaching. Nanako? Masahiko hasn't seen her for a while. Masahiko smiled at Konoha, good for you, you'll finally meet your big senior sister apprentice. Nanako wasn't far away, and she smiled wryly when she heard these words. Grandma Nanako. Nagato ran to her. Konan hesitated for a moment, but she still called her grandma. What can I do for you, Nanako? Masahiko asked after she greeted the 2 kids. Since Kushina should be graduating soon, I want to go and visit her in Konoha. Masahiko was startled, it should be after 6 months, why are you in such a hurry? Nanako showed a helpless expression, Sensei, you didn't bring me any news about Kushina for more than 2 years now, you know. Really? I should have told you. Masahiko scratched his head, feeling embarrassed. Chapter 166, Failing Together. Be careful, Konan, you are a little too anxious. Masahiko forgot that flying would be so appealing to children of this age. After mentioning to Konan that she might be able to fly in the future, she let go of everything and focused on the paper wings technique. As soon as the basic training of medical ninjutsu was completed, and got her chakra control improved a little, she began to make paper wings. It may be because of her young age and lightweight, a pair of incomplete wings actually carried her, but it only flew for half a meter. Konan didn't dare to lose focus and concentrated all of her energy on staying in the air. Well, this way, she can practice chakra control, and her chakra volume will improve faster. Masahiko pondered. About half a minute later, Konan controlled her pair of wings and landed tremblingly and cut her knee. Her forehead was sweaty, and chakra was almost exhausted. Masahiko nodded and walked over. Interest is the best motivation. But it still needs to improve. Before Masahiko approached, Nagato rushed over, holding on the crumbling Konan. Sure enough, it's still too reluctant after a short break, Konan said softly. Masahiko shook his head, don't worry, since you can already float, in 2 years at most, you will be able to fly freely. Sensei, how long will I need? Nagato looked longing. Masahiko glared at him, if you're in such a hurry, you better stop being lazy and master the shadow clone technique. Nagato smiled wryly and went to practice. Konan, continue your medical ninjutsu practice, your chakra volume, and chakra control aren't enough. Yes, sensei. This event above was repeated 5 times in 5 months, and every time her medical ninjutsu was improved slightly, Konan would try to fly once again. Of course, the time spent flying will be longer and longer with each progress. Sensei, I'm getting closer, let's practice medical ninjutsu for a while, I feel like I'll be able to fly soon. Masahiko shook his head, no, well stop here, I'm taking you to Konoha. In fact, in these 5 months, Masahiko had already taught her all medical ninjutsu that he knew, and his knowledge about the advanced techniques wasn't enough. Masahiko tidied up and prepared to take her to Konoha. On the one hand, Kushina was about to graduate, and on the other hand, he wanted to see if Tsunade could give her more help in medical ninjutsu. Nanako went to Konoha nearly half a year ago, probably because she wanted to observe her grandson-in-law. Both Kushina and Minato are 12 years old this year, and both have reached a level above Chunin, but neither applied for early graduation. It seems that Kushina knew that she would have to go back to the Uzumaki clan after graduation, thus, the two were trying their best to spend as much time together. Therefore, the two became the seniors of the Ninja Academy. But the 6th grade is coming to an end, and two will have to graduate eventually. Masahiko wanted to be there and witness this partition, personally, or think of a way to help the couple. Masahiko called Nagato, then the master and his disciples went to Konoha. Because the two kids like flying, Masahiko didn't walk and flew over with them. Konoha village still looks the same, nothing changed. Masahiko didn't rush to find Nanako and took the two kids who came for the first time to Konoha for a walk around the village. After a full circle, the sky dimmed, and the three returned to the main gate. Just by the look on their faces, Masahiko could tell that they were exhausted, so he said, let's go to the Senjo station and rest for a while. Masahiko didn't change his appearance when they were walking around the village. People from the Senjo had long known about his arrival. And soon as he reached the gate of the clan, Mito and Nanako were there to greet him. Are these the two new disciples of second grandpa? Mito said with a smile and then focused on Nagato. This kid? Masahiko nodded with a smile, yes, he's a sage body. This is the firstborn Uzumaki clansman to have such a talent. Mito replied with a smile, aren't you also a sage body? She obviously sensed it. Masahiko's face stiffened. Then, he started his nonsense again, well, I cultivated it through every day's training. Sensei, you've come at the right time, Kushina is graduating tomorrow, Nanako said. Yes, I've been counting the days, Masahiko replied and walked into the Senjo station with his two disciples. Kushina hasn't come back yet? Well, school isn't over yet. Masahiko glanced at Nanako and Mito. Nanako was adopted by his nephew many years ago, and she was considered as Mito's youngest sister, but she was much older. So, Nanako, did you like Kushina's little boyfriend after watching him for the last 6 months? Masahiko giggled. Nanako nodded, the boy from the Namikaze is well behaved, talented, but unfortunately, he's a commoner. Masahiko was startled, then shook his head, so since you've become the wife of the daimyo, you started looking down on the civilians? Nanako smiled bitterly, how it is possible, it's just that Kushina is the princess of the land of Whirlpool after all. It doesn't matter, that kid is gonna become the fourth hokage of Kon, just let Kushina marry Minato. The three kept talking, and without notice, the sky was completely dark, and Kushina returned from school. Now, she's the only exchanged student from the Uzumaki clan in Konoha. Grandpa, you're here. Kushina greeted him, then looked at Masahiko's two new disciples curiously. Sister Kushina, nice to meet you. The two said hello. Hello. Masahiko joked, don't be so polite. Your graduation exam is tomorrow, you're not nervous, right? Kushina hesitated, then clenched her fist, how come? It's gonna be easy. Masahiko's heart jumped, feeling that something was wrong. He just smiled and looked at Mito and Nanako, who looked at him and nodded tacitly. The next day, everyone went to watch Kushina's graduation exam. Kushina was really nervous, making mistakes again and again. Her clone technique was on the same level as her future son. Shuriken missed the target time after time, making her head teacher look anxious. More than that, this tension seemed to be contagious, and the same was the case for Minato. Masahiko watched the Konoha's genius failing to even make hand seal painfully, and didn't know if he should laugh or cry. Konan pulled Masahiko's sleeve and asked, Sensei, Sister Kushina seems to be nervous, let's cheer her up. Konan was already shouting, Sister Kushina, you can do it. This cheering made it even worse, and the three adults in the rear couldn't help but look helplessly at each other. That's it, this girl is going back home. Nanako sighed, then turned to leave. Masahiko smiled bitterly, these two fools, failing the test on purpose, is not the right answer. Chapter 167, Troubles. Grandma, I'm sorry I got a little nervous when I saw you all watching me. Let me take the exam next year, and I will definitely pass it. Kushina pulled Nanako's sleeves and acting like a baby. Masahiko shook his head helplessly. It seems that Kushina was willing to stay in school forever if it meant to keep by Minato's side. Nanako sighed, you and Minato are 12 years old already. How many years are you two planning to spend at the ninja school? Kushina put on the I do not know what you're talking about expression. If you want to stay, just stay. You've been staying with me for years now. Mito said, making Masahiko look anxious. Without him noticing, Mito was already 70 years old. But you can't stay at the Ninja Academy. Mito continued, your strength cannot be improved there, Kushina. Kushina was overjoyed and secretly glanced at Masahiko and Nanako. Their elderly surrounded her like a three-court trial. Masahiko's expression was irrelevant to her, while Nanako was tangled. For a long time, Masahiko was silent and remembered the plan that Hiruzen and Danzo used 2 years ago. Although the final result made him happy, he was eager for payback. Looking at ecstatic, Masahiko smiled and said, the exchange student program is now over. Konoha has no children left in the Uzumaki, and it won't be good for Kushina to stay. Mito was startled and felt confused. She knew that Masahiko had always supported Minato and Kushina, and seemed even happy when Mito told him about them. Nanako nodded in agreement. Then she needs to graduate first. Eventually, the three reached an agreement, and Kushina's graduation destination was determined. Other than that, you can bring that kid from the Namikaze to the Uzumaki clan. Masahiko continued to say. Masahiko was really seeking revenge. As for future events, he will think about them later. It was easy for Kushina to graduate since Hiruzen himself knew what's going on. He didn't stop it, nor he dared to even hesitate. Last time, he was hated by Masahiko for a long time. However, the plan of taking Minato to the Uzumaki clan unexpectedly ran into obstacles. Old devil, Minato is the child of the prophecy that I've worked so hard to find. And you're now trying to abduct him? Jiraiya's words made Masahiko frown. When did you accept him as a disciple? Masahiko looked at Jiraiya with a helpless expression. When Minato was just 10 years old. After all, I, Jiraiya-sama, can perceive the people's worth just by looking. It's a shame to miss Minato's witness points. Masahiko sighed. Well, have Masahiko never intended to take Jiraiya's disciple, but it was a pity that he didn't witness him accepting Minato as his disciple. Who would have thought that Jiraiya would accept him as a disciple even before Minato graduates? Masahiko muttered, according to the original, Minato should have graduated at the age of 10. Kushina is going back to the land of whirlpools, do you want your disciple to become a single dog like you? Masahiko said with a smile. Jiraiya didn't reply, his contemptuous eyes say it all, Masahiko had the least right to say such things. Well, so be it. It doesn't matter if the two children are separated for 2 years. Kushina can go back to the Uzumaki to receive the teaching of Fuinjutsu. There are many new sealing techniques that Mito doesn't know. Then she can go back. Masahiko waved his hand, then left. In fact, he wasn't in the mood to bother. After spending 2 days in Konoha, he found out about something more troublesome. It seems that Noeki really robbed Uchiha Mikoto. Well, the plot was the least thing Masahiko was worried about. In fact, he was interested to see what kind of monster Uchiha Itachi is going to be with mixed blood. But there is the trouble with the Senju and the Uchiha. Over the years, the old friends have gotten along relatively well, but they are still far from accepting marriage between the two clans. Senju is okay with it. After all, the girl is the one from the Uchiha, and any kids they will have are going to the Senju name, but the Uchiha clan probably wouldn't tolerate it. Then there is the trouble with the Akatsuki. Since they are committed to revising the plot, they are expected to have zero tolerance for such major changes in the plot, and Masahiko didn't know what kind of measure they will take. The fourth point is the most troublesome one. With the mixing blood of the Senju and the Uchiha, the 6 paths will certainly interfere. Masahiko knew that Rinnegan can only be awakened by combining Indra and Asura's chakra. If Noeki marries Mikoto, the chances for the future generation to have Rinnegan will be slightly higher, but it will still be difficult. However, awakening the Mungekyo Sharingan will no longer be an issue, and they will never suffer from fatigue or deteriorating eyesight. If one of the two clans discovers this secret, I'm afraid they will continue to marry until they create an army. Masahiko felt that it's really unlikely that the Hago Romo would let something like this slide. And Masahiko cannot really do anything to him. Well, it's not necessarily Masahiko frowned, who know how much strength is left in him. It's really troublesome. Masahiko sighed. Flying, Masahiko came to Konoha training ground. Here, a fierce battle was taking place. This was the fight number God knows how much between Noeki and Fugaku. He always lost before, but after being taught by Masahiko, they always tied. Masahiko glanced at him, shook his head, then walked aside. It seems to be another draw. Fugaku can't break Noeki's defense, and Noeki's offensive ability isn't very strong. To put it simpler, no one can do anything to the other. Masahiko wasn't the only one watching, Konoha's elder, Uchiha Kagami, was there too. Elder Masahiko, Kagami said hello to him, then walked over. Masahiko waved his hand, you're quite concerned about Fugaku. Is he your nephew? Kagami nodded and smiled bitterly, even if he's not my nephew, I must always pay attention to such a big thing. Masahiko sighed with a sad look. What's the matter? I've heard you're the one helping Noeki too. Kagami smiled. Masahiko shook his head, there are more things in it that you don't understand. Is it about these eyes? Kagami activated his Sharingan, then instantly, his eyes turned into Mangekyo Sharingan. Masahiko was surprised, when did you awake the Mangekyo Sharingan? Masahiko could actually feel a little sense of threat from these eyes. Damn it, Kagami is Shisui's grandfather, right? Does it mean that he has gained a strong genjutsu ability? Kagami closed his eyes calmly. I've awakened these eyes during the last battle against Tsunagakure. Masahiko nodded. You didn't use them yet? Then don't unless you really have to, it will deteriorate your eyesight. Is that true? Kagami nodded, I see. Masahiko glanced at him, then looked at the two who were still fighting, and sighed. More and more troubles. Chapter 168, Information about the Akatsuki. Masahiko took Nagato, and Jiraiya took Minato, then the 4 of them said farewell to Nanako and Kushina away. In the end, Kushina and Minato had to be separated for a while. After all, this Kushina had parents and a family in the land of Whirlpool. Minato needed to follow Jiraiya and train harder, Kushina has been dragging him behind for a while now. Old devil, what are you doing here? Are you still thinking of taking my disciple? Old devil was still Jiraiya's nickname for Masahiko even after all of these years. Masahiko glanced at him, Konan is still working on her medical ninjutsu with Tsunade. In fact, Masahiko is more worried about Nawake. Although he isn't weak, his strength was on the same level as Asuma in the original. Which means any path of the pain can kill him. Nawake is now fighting Fugaku every 3 to 5 days. But the most important person, Uchiha Mikoto, has never opposed his actions, which left the two with the feelings that the final winner will definitely win the beauty's booty. However, this conflict has become now more like between the two clans, rather than just the two young men. One of these two is the heir of the Senju, and the other is the nephew of the Uchiha Patriarch, and their status is basically the same. The outcome of their battle has become now more important to the two families. In other words, to the clans, to whom Uchiha Mikoto will marry was no longer important. My oh my, Masahiko sighed, ignoring Jiraiya, then returned to the Senju clan with Nagato. Wait on the street, Masahiko suddenly frowned, pulling Nagato while looking the other way. Something was wrong with the person who had just passed by him. You must be Kakuzu, no one will cover his head on such a hot day. Masahiko smiled. The person stopped, then turned around, revealing his familiar face. Elder Masahiko, long time no see, I didn't expect you to be in Konoha. Masahiko smiled, then looked at Nagato, you go back first. Sensei has just met an old friend, and this might take a while. After leaving, Kakuzu followed Masahiko to a tea house in Konoha. When the two sat down, Masahiko said with a smile, I heard that you've joined the Akatsuki, how did you dare to appear in Konoha? I've left it. Masahiko was startled, when have you left? Didn't the leader of the Akatsuki try to stop you? Kakuzu didn't answer that but said. I came to Konoha looking for the hokage, but since you're here, there's no need for that anymore. Masahiko squinted, so, you're trying to sell some information about the Akatsuki? Masahiko was also interested to know more about the Akatsuki. He actually brought Kakuzu here to ask him about it. That's right. Information about an Akatsuki member is 10 million ryo per person, 20 million for the leader, and 20 million for their purpose. So what do you need? Kakuzu said slowly. Masahiko smiled, Kakuzu was still the same old greedy bastard he knew before. Well, I'm not in a hurry, I'm more curious to know the reason you left them for. Didn't they pay you enough money? Kakuzu paused for a moment, then shook his head, after I joined the Akatsuki, I've earned more money than before, but this organization is a bit shady, none of its members seems normal, and its purpose isn't clear. None of its members seems normal? Masahiko carefully observed Kakuzu in front of him, then shook his head sighing, he himself wasn't a normal person either. Then start by telling me what seemed to you abnormal, rest assured, I will pay. Kakuzu hesitated, but he didn't have doubts about Masahiko's morals. Every member of the organization communicates with a code name. I don't know their true names, nor have I seen them. My code name was Baidu. Note, Baidu is a god in charge of lives. Masahiko was startled, but he wasn't surprised. What about the rings? Did you give yours back? What rings? Masahiko didn't know if he should cry or laugh, this version of the Akatsuki is so fake, that they didn't even make rings. Without understanding the angle, Kakuzu continued. The guy codenamed Santai is a middle-aged man, a crazy weird man. Santai? Masahiko frowned. Haiden isn't necessarily born at this time, thus, he had no idea who this crazy person should be. Santai is a character in Taoism. It's a god in charge of wealth and power. Besides, he never shuts up about how he wants to kill everyone who doesn't believe in his god Jashin. Masahiko recovered, so it's Haiden after all? I've never heard of someone else who believes in Jashin. It seems that you're very satisfied with this information. Noticing Masahiko's expression, Kakuzu stretched out his right hand. What do you want? Did you learn a special handshake in the Akatsuki or something? This information just now worths 10 million. Kakuzu didn't like jokes when it comes to money. Masahiko waved his hand, you didn't give me any useful information about this member, it only worths 1 million. Kakuzu immediately got up, turned, and left, but Masahiko quickly stopped him. In fact, he could force him to talk, but after so many years since he tried to assassinate Hashirama, Kakuzu redeemed himself by helping Konoha on a lot of occasions. Now he's even giving Masahiko information about the Akatsuki. Masahiko isn't really embarrassed to do it, but the time and the location are just not right. Give me one more, and I'll pay you. Kakuzo gave Masahiko an in-depth look, then sat back. The code name is 0. Wait, Masahiko interrupted him. Talk to me about the other members. Leave the leader as the last one. Kakuzo replied, 0 isn't the leader. Although I haven't seen him, I've heard his voice. It seems that he's just a 10-year-old kid following the leader. The leader's code name isn't 0? A kid, the one who matches the age, should be Sasori, but I haven't heard any news of him leaving Tsunagakure. Then is it Kisame? He looked old, but he shouldn't be 10 years old now. After knowing that it was a child, Masahiko's first suspects were these two. Kakuzo stretched his right hand out again. Masahiko paused, then took out 20 million ryo and handed it to him. Tell me now about the leader of the Akatsuki. The moment he took the money, Kakuzo started speaking much faster. The leader doesn't have a code name, he hides his figure when he shows up, and never told us about his real name. But he always issues some strange and troublesome orders. In fact, that's why I've left the organization. Strange orders, is related to correcting the plot? Masahiko thought. For example, before, the leader ordered me to instigate Kirigakure to attack Iwagakure and prevent Imagakure from attacking Kumagakure. Kakuzo continued. So, this is why these two ended up attacking each other? Masahiko suddenly realized what was happening. The other members were also issued with similar unprofitable tasks, although the leader funds us generously. Masahiko nodded. It seems that it will be easier to deal with than what I thought. Masahiko pondered for a moment, then took out some extra money. So, where's the Akatsuki next? Chapter 169, Third-rated drama movie. Masahiko frowned as he saw Kakuzo leaving. Kakuzo didn't know where the Akatsuki nest was, or maybe they didn't even have one yet. Kakuzo has only worked with 3 members during his time at the organization, a madman, a child, and the leader. And he didn't know much about their abilities. The location where he met them was in Takigakure, which is Kakuzo's country, where they took the initiative to find him. As for the other members, he didn't even know whether there were others. Sure enough, the Akatsuki doesn't want Nawaki and Mikoto to end up together. Masahiko sighed. In fact, this was the mission Kakuzo was talking about. He wasn't willing to meddling in the romance life of 3 teenagers, even for money. Or maybe he didn't dare. Masahiko smiled. Kakuzo feared death after all. Besides, Konoha's police force should be strengthened. Kakuzo went in and out, but no one noticed it. Or maybe because he was with me, so no one cared? Masahiko felt that it's probably the second. The unknown is truly the greatest fear. After learning more about the Akatsuki, Masahiko felt much relaxed. Since the leader of the Akatsuki is temporarily working on revising the plot, Masahiko only needs to keep an eye on those changes. For example, he only needs to worry about Nawaki's safety, since it's unlikely for them to go after Mikoto. Time went by, and Masahiko ended up staying for another half-month in Konoha, and everything progressed normally. Nawaki and Fugaku fought back and forth, and the two actually improved more rapidly due to this competition. Masahiko was worried that these two would also start showing feelings. The Senju and the Uchiha were also waiting for the final outcome, and no further conflicts occurred under Hiruzen's control. Everything was so harmonious until Nawaki won for the first time. In fact, it isn't hard to figure out how this happened. Due to the Senju blood, his chakra was special, and it was only a matter of time before Nawaki grew stronger physically. However, Fugaku had already awakened his 3 Tomo Sharinan, and unless he awakens them again and obtains the Mungakyo Sharinan, there was no way for him to make such significant progress. Therefore, Nawaki managed to catch up to him quickly. After he defeated Fugaku, Nawaki immediately went to the Uchiha excitedly, but he was stopped from entering. Since the two kept fighting for a long time, by the time Nawaki won, everyone knew the reason they were fighting for. Everyone thought that the Uchiha have also acquiesced that as long as Nawaki beat Fugaku, he can have Mikoto, but it seems that they never expected that day to come. As the patriarch, Uchiha Kagami didn't appear, but the 3 elders of the Uchiha clan flashed in at the same time. This has also detonated the Senju's emotions. Unlike the original, the Senju didn't wither during the Second Shinobi World War. And both clans were still known as Konoha's strongest. The scene appealed more people, and the crowd went bigger. Even Tsunade ended up there by Nawaki's side, as his older sister. And the situation seemed to be getting bad there in front of the Uchiha's main gate. There were a lot of onlookers. The Uchiha wanted to wrap things fast, but they were stopped by the sudden arrival of the Senju. And they were clearly trying to shame them in front of everyone. Masahiko was one of these onlookers. He used his transformation technique to get close and observe the situation. Before coming here, he entrusted both Nagato and Konan to Mito to take care of them. He was actually prepared for the worst, and if things went wrong, he was ready to fight the 6 paths of pain. Wow, even Hiruzen and Danzo came. The two rushed to the scene to calm the situation down between the two clans. Kagami, come out! Danzo yelled immediately. Kagami walked out with a wry smile. Although the Uchiha is usually under his management, he really can't do anything with this kind of excitement. Masahiko watched this calmly. No matter what the final result, he was mentally prepared. It's either to comfort Nawaki or to desperately try to deal with it. Hiruzen has been trying hard to persuade, but the matter wasn't resolved, his effect on them was weak. However, Danzo was tougher and forced Kagami to bring Uchiha Mikoto and let her choose. Things after that got weirder and developed into a scene from a third-rate drama movie that caused a dumbfounded expression on Masahiko's face. After Mikoto came out, her parents warned her that if she chose Nawaki, they would cut her off from the family. Mikoto then squeezed Fugaku's name out of her mouth with the exchange of the Uchiha clan's loud cheers. However, the Senju was obviously not satisfied with this result, feeling that Mikoto's choice was affected by external forces. The conflict intensified, and things seemed about to get bloody. However, in order not to embarrass Mikoto anymore, Nawaki gave up and turned away. Life doesn't always go as you wish, I'm sorry boy. Masahiko sighed, watching Tsunade catching up to him. Feeling that this matter was over, Masahiko was both sad for Nawaki and slightly relieved. Unexpectedly, a second later, more drama took place, watching Nawaki running away, and under everyone's surprised gazes Mikoto gritted her teeth, then threw off her parents, and ran toward him, while Fugaku tried to catch up to her. Masahiko's twitched his mouth, he really didn't know what to say and felt slightly vigilant. Am I under genjutsu? I feel like things got really weird. Masahiko murmured, watching a few umbu sending him off along the other civilians. The conflict between the Senju and the Uchiha was getting worse, and Hiruzen could no longer suppress it. I don't think I should step forward. Masahiko followed the crowd as the umbu was asking them to leave. There's nothing unusual. The 6 paths of pain didn't show up, nor any of the Akatsuki members. But why? Is it because the final result isn't certain yet? Mister, what is happening? A young man's voice came beside Masahiko. I don't know, join in the fun. Masahiko turned his head with a smile and was slightly startled. Opposite him was a young man of 18 or 19 years old with a smile on his face. He seemed a little familiar. Looking behind him, he was carrying a basket filled with all kinds of ingredients. The young man noticed his gazes and responded with a smile, these are fresh vegetables that I just collected outside of the village, and I'm going to sell it to the shops around here. Masahiko nodded and replied, it's always nice to see a young man like you supporting his family. Masahiko then turned around to catch up to the others and see the final outcome. The young man continued, it's a little hard. My wife has just gotten pregnant. I'm thinking about saving some money to open a shop. However, I haven't decided what to sell. Masahiko stopped, and the young man continued, Mister, do you know what the villagers like the most? How about ramen? Masahiko was startled, then turned his head slowly, while squinting his eyes. Ramen is good, I like ramen. Chapter 170, Compromise. Thank you for your help. Masahiko looked at the young man bowing in front of him. After remembering that the person in front of him was the boss of the famous ramen Ichiraku from the original, Masahiko was no longer in the mood to watch the final outcome of the love triangle and chatted with him. In the end, Masahiko provided him with a part of the startup funds, which made young Toki bows to him and thank him. Masahiko frowned as he waved his hand away. Just now facing Toki, Masahiko let out of his full power, but the person in front of him didn't even have a trace of chakra fluctuation, as if he was really just an ordinary person, or maybe that's what Toki wanted him to think. Does Itsutsuki Toki really exist? Masahiko murmured. He was very curious about the intense discussion he read on the internet in his previous life and wanted to clarify himself. In fact, he never believed it, thinking that he was just an ordinary person, but his sudden appearance at this time made him suspicious. It's a coincidence, isn't it? Ramen mode, 5 stars. Ramen shuriken isn't a thing, right? This is troubling. After a while, Masahiko returned to his senses to find that the crowd in front of him had dispersed. The conflict between the Senju and the Uchiha has also been resolved after they were suppressed by Mito. The Akatsuki's attack that Masahiko was so worried about didn't happen either, perhaps because they knew he was in Konoha, or maybe they have just delayed it. I didn't see what happened in the end. Masahiko murmured and returned to the Senju. There is no need to ask, feeling the lively atmosphere inside the clan, he knew that Mikoto chose Noeki in the end. Now, I can only hope the Fugaku will quickly find another woman to give birth to Itachi and Suzuki. Although this result may have some impact on his witness points, he was still happy for Noeki. Who would have thought that the kid, who died young in the original, will live to have such a happy life? Masahiko thought while walking toward Mito's house, where the chakra fluctuations of many acquaintances were there. Noeki's father Kenji, sister Tsunade, and a few elders from the Senju clan, who didn't show up earlier, were gathered there. Also, Danzo was there. Masahiko walked into the room, smiled, and said, "Congratulations, Noeki." Noeki was also full of joy, "Thanks to your teaching." Masahiko nodded and looked at the others with a smile. Then he finally focused his attention on Danzo, as he felt that the atmosphere in the room was serious. "So, Hiruzen is currently with the Uchiha? And he sent you here to hold the Senju and wait for news?" Danzo smiled bitterly. Although it was true, Masahiko's words made what was already an embarrassing environment even tenser. "Elder Masahiko, don't worry, this time Uchiha Mikoto made it clear to them. It's unlikely that they would dare to refuse." Masahiko twitched his mouth, "You never learn. You think the Uchiha will just agree?" As soon as these words were said, Hiruzen's chakra quickly approached the place and entered the house. The Uchiha agreed. Everyone in the room let out a long sigh of relief and then turned their heads at Masahiko with weird eyes. Masahiko felt embarrassed, and he glared at Hiruzen, feeling like he was deliberately opposing him. Hiruzen didn't understand what was happening, and after a moment, he continued. "But they have some conditions." Masahiko let out a sigh of relief, so he was right. "What are the conditions? Are they gonna ask Noeki to kill a bear with his bare hands or something? Or maybe they asked for a big dowry?" Masahiko said with a smile, but it was obvious that people in the house didn't believe the Uchiha would dare to ask for such a thing. It was no different than asking for a war. Hiruzen smiled and shook his head, "How could it be possible? They only have one request. If Noeki and Mikoto's children awakened the Sharingan, they would be counted as members of the Uchiha clan. This is unacceptable." Before Masahiko could speak, Tsunade yelled, clenching her fists. The other people in the room also frowned. Although they didn't like it, the Sharingan is something. Masahiko smiled, shaking his head, "If so, the children will 100% belong to the Uchiha clan." Seeing that others were puzzled, Masahiko didn't explain. "The Senju's blood will assist the Uchiha's blood, but no one would believe it. We can't agree to this condition, Hokage-sama." It was Kenji speaking. As the current Senju patriarch and Noeki's father, he has more to say in this regard. Noeki had a solemn expression, he knew how serious this matter is. The atmosphere was getting intense. Masahiko sighed, "Since they're willing to make a request, then this matter is settled. Noeki is only 17 years old, and Mikoto is 16 years old. What's the hurry, everyone will discuss it later on." Hiruzen and Danzo looked at each other. The expressions their face were a little cautious. The Senju and the Uchiha are two big clans in Konoha. In fact, for this reason, they don't support the marriage between the two clans. However, because of Mito and Masahiko, they can only bury this idea in their hearts and take the initiative to help. Masahiko actually knew this, but he didn't care. He fully understands that it was impossible to unite the two clans even with this marriage. And this is just because it was Noeki. If it's someone else, he would have taken the initiative to stop it. At least until he possesses the power of the Kekii Mora, it would be too dangerous. The marriage was basically set, and what remained is the wrangling between the two families. After all, the current patriarch of the Uchiha clan is Kagami. Even if the three elders are very tough, one glare from his Mungekyo Sharinon will smooth things up. In the end, the Uchiha clan compromised a little bit. If the two have more than one child, the eldest son will be a Senju no matter what, and the youngest children must be surnamed Uchiha if they awakened their Sharinon before graduating from the Ninja Academy. The Senju didn't persecute anymore. They were able to accept this condition. Before graduation from the Ninja Academy, kids these days would hardly experience any battles. It was almost impossible to awaken the Sharinon before that. Although things are basically set, the two kids are still young after all, and this isn't the Warring States period. People don't marry at the age of 15 anymore. At that time, families encouraged early marriage because they were losing too many people in the war. As for now, everyone marries after the age of 20, but the two didn't want to delay it that far. After discussion, the Uchiha agreed to let her marry at the beginning of the year 38 of Konoha, that is, 1.5 years later, Mikoto will marry a Senju. The storm finally settled, but Masahiko was frowning, then he smiled and said, I have one more condition to add. Everyone in the Uchiha was shocked, the Senju seemed a little confused. Masahiko didn't intervene before, but when they finally came to an agreement, he spoke. Masahiko looked at the Uchiha's representatives, is there any girl in your clan who is close to Mikoto's age? I don't know, something close like Miki Uchiha, Michi Uchiha, how about, Mikomo? Just find one and let her be married to Fugaku and compensate him. The audience was confused. Masahiko was also helpless, and now he could only hope that matching names will have the power to bring Suzuki to life. Chapter 171, The First Bowl of Ramen. The marriage between Noeki and Mikoto was settled, and Konan's medical ninjutsu training with Tsunade came to an end. Masahiko took the two disciples to pack their clothes and set off on the road to return to the Uzumaki village. Mito, we are leaving. Grandma Mito, goodbye. Masahiko and his two disciples said goodbye to Mito, and the three set out on their way home. Mito watched the three of them walk away, turned around, and walked back into the house, showing a bit of a helpless expression. Second grandpa, don't hide, come out. Masahiko's figure drilled slowly out of the ground, releasing black mode. Kyuubi's perception is really stronger than mine. Masahiko thought when he enters black mode, Mito wouldn't be able to perceive him. Mito shook her head, it's not that I perceived you, but the amount of chakra on the one who left with the kids was obviously wrong. So I simply figured out that it was a shadow clone. Masahiko's face stiffened, then he breathed a sigh of relief. He had to give that clone 50% of his chakra to that shadow clone to be strong enough. Except for Mito, no one would notice it, even his two disciples. Don't tell anyone about my stay in Konoha, Masahiko said. Mito nodded, you want people to think you left Konoha, right? Is it to deal with the Akatsuki? Yes, there's still a year and a half before Noeki and Mikoto's wedding. During this time, I'm worried that something will go off. Masahiko responded, but in fact, he has more than just this in mind. In addition to worrying about the Akatsuki's attack, he was also worried about what measures Hiruzen and Danzo would take. More importantly, the sudden appearance of Toki made him a bit suspicious. Transformation technique. Under Mito's watchful gazes, Masahiko changed his appearance to the look he had when he watched the chaos before. I'll spend the time in Konoha looking like this, it's okay if you know it, but you must not tell anyone. Mito nodded. Masahiko activated black mode again, sneaked out of Senju Station, and lifted it in a deserted corner inside the village. First, let's take a look at Ichiraku Ramen first. A few days later, with the funds Masahiko provided, Toki has successfully bought a shop in Konoha and was working hard to renovate and transform it into a ramen shop. Seeing Masahiko's arrival, Toki quickly greeted him. You're here, thank you for the help. It would have taken me many years before I have the opportunity to open this ramen restaurant. Masahiko nodded and glanced inside the house. A variety of good materials were there, and a bar counter has been faintly formed. How come the counter is shaped this way? Why don't you find a few carpenters? Masahiko said with a smile. Toki smiled bitterly, I'm afraid that I'm out of money. If I hire a carpenter again, I'm afraid I won't even have the money to purchase ingredients. Masahiko suddenly was startled. He didn't feel any money when he suddenly put his hand in his pocket. There should be a lot, right? After a moment of silence, Masahiko touched his arm again, where he usually stashes the money, and his face stiffened. Where did my money go? Masahiko has never been short of money thanks to Hashirama losing all of his money and using Madara's more than 20 years ago. Unexpectedly, when he looked for money now, he didn't even find a penny. After a moment of contemplation, Masahiko's eyes widened. Damn it, I gave him all my money to get information about the Akatsuki, but he said he didn't know, then I forgot to take it back. At that time, I've spaced out thinking about the Akatsuki. No wonder Kakuzu left in a hurry. Masahiko thought, gritting his teeth. What's wrong with you? Toki asked in confusion. Masahiko suddenly breathed a sigh of relief and shook his head, helplessly, it's okay. I just thought of something, but it has nothing to do with you. Keep the hard work. Masahiko didn't even think about helping, he was going to Konoha Casino to withdraw some money. Mister, wait. Toki chased him, you've helped me a lot, but I still don't know your name. After a pause, he continued, my name is Toki. Masahiko paused, and with a smirk on his face, he said, my name is Atsutsuki Hagoromo. Note, Atsutsuki Hagoromo, the Rikuta Sennin. There wasn't anything strange on Toki's expression, he just nodded and said, I will remember it. Masahiko waved his hand and turned to the casino. He used the Rikuta Sennin's name just to test his reaction, but the result wasn't satisfactory. I really think too much, maybe it's just a coincidence. I shouldn't be fooled by these netizens' theories from my previous life. Time passed, and after half a month, Masahiko became rich again, and many people in the village became poor. Masahiko was hiding in Konoha this time, but he planned to stay for a year and a half, so he couldn't always walk around the street. With the money, he had an idea and brought the shop next to the upcoming Ichiraku Ramen. He hadn't figured out what to sell, but he was free, so he decorated it himself. Uncle hokage Romo, what are you doing here? Hearing the voice next door, Toki came to check. Masahiko smiled, I'm also opening a shop here. We will be neighbors in the future. Toki hesitated, then smiled, and said, you're not opening a ramen shop too, right? Masahiko shook his head, how is it possible? In fact, he really wanted to say, so he could see his reaction, but after thinking about it, it would be really unreasonable to bully an ordinary person like this. So, without planning to sell anything, Masahiko started working on his shop. His speed was, of course, much faster than Toki, but the latter was always one step ahead. After all, the Toki started half a month earlier than him. Just when he was steps away from finishing the work, Toki came to find him. Uncle hokage Romo, my Ichiraku Ramen, will open tomorrow. You can come to eat the first bowl of ramen. You can come whenever you want. And you can bring anyone with you. It will always be open for you for free. Masahiko was startled and nodded with a smile. It will open tomorrow, don't forget. I will come. Sending away the joyful Toki, Masahiko's heart moved, I almost forget that witnessing the opening of the Ichiraku Ramen will yield me witness points. Konoha village isn't very large, and 2 new shops were renovated at the same time, which has long aroused the curiosity of most villagers. Early the next morning, Toki hung up the plaque of Ichiraku Ramen and immediately was surrounded by a lot of villagers. It turns out to be a ramen shop, I've never had that before. The price is quite low. The place is so small. There were all kinds of comments. Masahiko is already sitting in the shop, waiting for the first bowl of ramen. At the same time, Chinese characters crossed in front of him, witness and drastically changed the main storyline of Naruto World, Ichiraku Ramen. Reward 50, *5, witness points. Masahiko was taken aback and go overjoyed. There are so many. Ichiraku Ramen is really a pivotal place in the Naruto world. Chapter 172, Amazon. Weird eating noises. After he demolished the large bowl of ramen, Masahiko nodded in satisfaction. As the first sample, Masahiko was very surprised at how good the ramen tasted. Looking at the Toki busy all of a sudden, Masahiko didn't expect that he would have this many people on the first day. There were only 5 chairs in the shop, which was obviously not enough. Over the years, as someone who ate in every restaurant in Konoha, Masahiko didn't find Ichiraku Ramen outstanding among them when it came to the food, but in terms of the overall price, it was. For one large bowl of ramen that could fill the hunger of a grown man, only 150 ryo were needed. Asuma's head could get you 20,000 bowls. Hey, why do I always end up using Asuma's head to measure prices? This isn't right, Masahiko muttered. Speaking of Asuma, he should be born already. Masahiko looked around at this time, to find out that some people were really getting tired of him. A lot of costumes were waiting patiently, but he was still wasting even after he finished eating. Some have even started mumbling curses, which made Masahiko laugh, order another bowl and eat his noodles one by one, with an enjoyable expression. Anyway, now that he has changed his appearance, nothing can stop him. Toki quickly finished preparing what the other four in the store ordered and went out comforting the people, then asked them what they would want to order, so he could make it in advance. However, Masahiko added fuel to the fire by turning around and coughing twice. Sorry, I'm getting older, I have to chew slowly, cough, cough, cough. He really choked on his food at the end. Masahiko turned around quickly, and drank a cup of water. I almost died, man, no kidding, I really need to eat slowly. Masahiko then continued to eat his ramen in slow motion. It opened in the morning, and Masahiko kept eating until noon. Other customers kept changing, and the long queue outside slowly disappeared. Except for the lack of space, Ichiraku Ramen received a lot of praise. Masahiko was finally about to finish his last bowl when he suddenly felt 3 familiar chakra approaching. Boss, 3 bowls of ramen. Jiraiya's voice came. Masahiko glanced at the 3 of them. They looked like they had just returned from a mission. Except for the tireless Jiraiya, the other 2 seemed beat up. Where did these 3 go? Masahiko didn't pay attention to anything this half-month. Finally, when their turn came, the 3 walked in and sat on the free seats. Toki took their orders, prepared really quickly, then came to Masahiko's side with 2 extra ramen bowls in his hand and sat next to him. The 3 Sunin obviously didn't recognize Masahiko, who was using the transformation technique and wasn't really paying attention to them, as he was looking at Toki. Business was good today. It looks like you would need a waiter soon. Toki ate his noodles, shaking his head. There are only 5 seats in total, I can handle them by myself. Masahiko was startled. Are you planning to keep on having only 5 seats all the time? That's obviously not enough. Toki smiled bitterly. Well, see about that later. Currently, I don't have money to expand the shop. Masahiko pondered for a moment, then said, smiling, how about takeaway? Toki was obviously puzzled. There was no such thing as takeaway in this world, so Masahiko explained it to him in detail. You can even hire ninjas to deliver food to you. After the explanation, Masahiko added. That's actually a good idea, Orochimaru said hoarsely. Masahiko smiled and turned back, do you think so? The tone and attitude were relaxed, which gave Masahiko an inexplicable sense of familiarity. You're Shinobi Dano, Hagoromo Ajizan is the owner of the shop next door, Toki explained. Hager Moro? Tsunade, who was eating, raised her head questioningly. There are possible names for the Rikuta Sunin mentioned in the ancient book of the Senju clan. Fortunately, Tsunade didn't like reading very much, and she only felt that the name was a bit familiar. Weird eating noises. Of course, no one would eat like this by Jiraiya. Tsunade and Orochimaru were only halfway, but Jiraiya has just finished drinking the noodle soup. Boss, it tastes good, gets me another one. Toki got busy again, and Jiraiya looked at Masahiko. Hagoromo Ajizan, what does your shop sell? Is it food too? Jiraiya also liked eating. Masahiko ate all day, and he didn't really think about that. My shop. Masahiko hesitated, then said with a smile, my shop is called Amazon, and I sell wooden people. When he mentioned the wooden people, he successfully aroused the curiosity of the 3 people. Just by looking at these 3, who were getting older and close to how they looked in the anime, Masahiko suddenly had an idea. In his previous life, there was a thing called anime figures, but unfortunately, he couldn't buy them. Now when he thought about it, he has LV10 carving skills. He could make things like this. And it would be interesting to see their reactions. A few days later, the 3 of them became the first costumers in Masahiko's store. Unlike the Ichiraku Ramen, the plaque outside of Masahiko's gate had the words Amazon Store on it, and no one knew what it's selling. Is this my great-grandpa? Tsunade's voice came out in surprise, looking at little Masahiko figure. It seems, Tsunade murmured. Orochimaru also looked around. Jiraiya, look, it's you. Hearing this, Jiraiya quickly walked toward him and took a few glances. Hey, why am I the only one who looks stupid? After muttering such a sentence, they began to look around. Is this supposed to be Uchiha Madara? There's also Grandpa Hashirama. Tsunade kept roaming around. There's also Sarutobi-sensei, Orochimaru, Jiraiya. Boss, how come there are Orochimaru and me, but no Tsunade? Jiraiya asked. Tsunade was taken aback, only then she noticed that she didn't see her figure. Masahiko smiled, glancing at Jiraiya. He knew that he would pay attention to this. My shop only sculpts men. Women will only be sculpted if they ask for a figure and purchased for themselves. Otherwise, I will have people like you all day wanting to buy 10. Jiraiya's face flushed. Jiraiya, you idiot! Die! Masahiko sighed, looking at the big hole in his wall. He had to close the business right away after the opening. Boss, how much is for my grandpa? Tsunade said, feeling awkward. 1,002,000. So expensive. Masahiko smiled and nodded. Opening a shop was just a thing he tried to pass the time. He doesn't want to be tied up here all day, so he simply set the price high. However, since you're my first customer, you can use this coupon discount code. Write this down. Chapter 173, Instantly Exposed. Hey, Tsunade, Orochimaru, there is no need to buy so much, right? Our mission funds for the past half-month have been used up all at once. Jiraiya sighed again and again. In Masahiko's shop, Tsunade bought Hashirama, Tobirama, and Hiruzen, and now she has asked for a customized figure of her, which makes it a total of 4. On the other hand, Orochimaru, in addition to buying a figure of him, bought Uchiha Madara. There are 6 in total. Using the coupon code that Masahiko has provided them, they won figure out of the 6 for free, and Masahiko earned 5 million ryo. They worked hard for the previous half a month, and all the funds for an S-class mission were used up. Tsunade, something is wrong with that shop's owner, Orochimaru said hoarsely. Tsunade nodded solemnly. Jiraiya also looked left and right, with a dumb expression, then he became serious. Yes, something is wrong. Although he didn't know where the problem was. Tsunade shook her head, then her expression got relaxed again. I probably know who he is. Orochimaru paused and nodded, then, my guess is correct. After that, the two didn't speak another word, and Jiraiya seemed extremely confused. In the Amazon shop, Masahiko watched the 3 of them walk away, turned around and took a few pieces of wood, and began to restock. In the meantime, many curious villagers walked in, and after they saw the figures they wanted to buy, but the asking price made them all say, "Are you crazy?" Masahiko sent away a dozen people with an annoyed expression, took a piece of wood, and carved, 1 million for each figure, come in if you're the one. Then he hanged it on the door. Sure enough, no one came in until the evening. Masahiko wasn't in a hurry, he didn't plan to be a successful shop owner. He deliberately chose this shop in the center of Konoha, so he could keep an eye on Ichiraku Ramen, and also be able to rush to the village as soon as possible. As for the Akatsuki's surprise attack, he wasn't worried as much as before. Noeki was no longer a weak kid that would be killed by a spike. Calm days and days passed. Masahiko kept training on his gentle fist every day, sculpted his figures, and observed Toki, feeling relaxed. Until a slightly familiar figure, one day passed before his eyes. This guy. The visitor was covering his face, wearing a thick cloak, and carrying a big sword wrapped in bandages on his back. Is this supposed to be a cover? Masahiko couldn't help but laugh with tears in his eyes. From the shape of his knife, he could tell that it should be Kubikaribasho. Of course, the one who's carrying it wasn't Zabuza, he wasn't even born yet. It should be Chizobaiwa. He remembers that he was one of the 7 legendary swordsmen that attacked the Uzumaki before. Masahiko sensed the surrounding area slightly, and he could feel that some Umbu were following him, but they didn't attack him immediately, fearing that some civilians will accidentally get injured. Also, Sakumo was one of them. Masahiko couldn't help but laugh again. So this is the guy the Akatsuki chose to send? What exactly he thinks he's doing? Sneak into Konoha blatantly? Jozo himself didn't know what he was doing after the battle with the Uzumaki. The 7 legendary swordsmen were defeated, 3 of them were killed, and the other 4 fled. Still, he alone chose to completely escape Kirigakure and become a rogue ninja. With his strength, life after becoming a rogue ninja was beautiful, especially after joining the Akatsuki. Although the leader occasionally sends them to do some weird mission, the funds are sufficient, and the mission difficulty is generally not serious. But this time, on impulse, he took on a mission that he regretted later, dismantling a couple in Konoha, Senju Noeke and Uchiha Mikoto. He originally thought it would be easy to break up this couple. He also believed that it had something to do with the leader, thinking that someone has taken his love. So he felt that it would be best if he killed the man and took revenge. But when he came to Konoha, he found out that Senju Noeke was actually the heir of the Senju clan, and seemed to be close to the great elder of the Uzumaki clan, Masahiko, who was also in Konoha. After hesitating for a month and finally learning that Masahiko had returned to the Uzumaki, he gritted his teeth and sneaked into Konoha. But he didn't expect to be instantly exposed by the Umbu. Moreover, one of the people who watched him seemed to be strong, so he didn't dare to act rashly. Jozo knew that the one thing that kept them from attacking him was the large number of people on the streets. Looking around, he gritted his teeth, then walked into Ichiraku Ramen. Masahiko, who had been staring at him not far away, was also startled. This guy can actually eat noodles with those teeth? Jozo ordered a bowl of ramen carefully, while he was actually looking for a chance to escape. The more he procrastinated, the more disadvantaged he was. Masahiko's heart moved. Jozo seems to be knowing what's going on around him. As soon as he concentrated, a strong wind blew up on the street, covering the Umbusai. My chance! Jozo yelled inwardly, but as soon as he took 2 steps to the door, the wind stopped abruptly. Hey, you didn't pay, Toka shouted, gritting his teeth. I haven't finished eating yet, Jozo replied and returned back to his seat. The Umbu glanced at each other, then Sakumo frowned, and decided to take action, but a gust of strong wind hit and almost made the other party out of sight. When they were about to move, Jozo suddenly started swaying, then fall into the bowl, splashing the noodle soup on the counter. After 2 seconds of silence, a tumult came. Ah! He ate ramen to death. Toka started running in circles, not knowing what to do. The 4 Umbu rushed over and checked Jozo's situation. Captain, it seems that he got food poisoned. Sakumo was obviously at a loss as well. It was sad that an S-class rogue ninja would be arrested for food poisoning at a ramen restaurant in Konoha. Sakumo frowned, looked at Toki, who looked troubled. The shop is temporarily closed, take the boss away. A farce came to an end, and Masahiko couldn't help but shake his head. Sorry, Toki. The violent wind he set off allowed him to quickly add some ingredients to the ramen bowl, and give them the chance to catch Jozo without injury. As for Toki, nothing will happen to him, and maybe they will even give him a medal. Sure enough, the Akatsuki has taken a move, but why did they only send Jozo? Do they have a backup plan? Masahiko muttered, pondered for a while, and said, or maybe they don't have anyone else. And there's also the Kubikari Basho. Masahiko hesitated. Just now, the sword was taken away by Konoha Umbu. He actually wanted it. The Uzumaki have 3. He wanted to collect the other 4. It will be cool if they form the 7 legendary swordsmen of the Uzumaki. Maybe I should steal it. I mean, take it over. Chapter 174, Shadow Clone. After being thrown in jail because of Masahiko, Toki was released in less than 2 hours, unscathed. Masahiko wasn't surprised. He observed him for a month, and he couldn't find anything wrong with him. Konoha's Umbu wouldn't humiliate their own civilians, not to mention the Umbu led by Sakumo. Feeling guilty, Masahiko went to comfort him. It is a bit too much for an ordinary person, Masahiko murmured with a sad expression after he noticed how Tokai's hands kept shaking. Masahiko found out that carving sculptures was also a way to put his thoughts on. So he kept carving various demeanors for Hashirama and Madara, which made him feel vivid again. Huh? Masahiko raised his head, then smiled, saying, welcome. Since Masahiko hanged out the 1 million for each figure sign on the door, his reputation spread far and wide, and no one visited him since. However, Masahiko wasn't short for money and felt happy this way. Yet all of a sudden, Heitake Sakumo decided to visit. Sakumo nodded in response to Masahiko's greeting, walked into the store, and looked around. After a long time, Sakumo suddenly turned his head and said, Elder Masahiko? Masahiko's face became stiff, then he quickly acted as if he was confused. Who? Masahiko wanted to continue to conceal his identity, not knowing that Tsunade and Orochimaru have already guessed that it was him. Sakumo put his hand on his chin then said, "It was you who put the poison inside the ramen bowl, and before that, you've set off that strong wind, so none of us can see you, right?" Masahiko looked at how Sakumo seemed affirmative, and cursed inwardly, "What are you exactly, Detective Conan? Shinobi Dano, you're joking, right?" Masahiko was struggling to death. Sakumo glanced at Masahiko again, smiled, and said, "Except you and Mito-sama, who else out there so familiar with the first hokage to be able to sculpt him this detailed?" Masahiko frowned, he seemed like he was about to say something, but he suddenly hesitated and sighed, "Well, it was getting boring anyway." Sakumo smiled bitterly, "Well, I had to investigate this matter, I hope you understand." Masahiko glared, "And what were your investigation results?" Sakumo paused, "It might not satisfy you." "That's okay." Masahiko murmured, then pointed to a chair in the store, "Sit down and tell me what you know so far." Sakumo sat down and explained, "That person is an S-class rogue ninja called Jozo from Kirigakure, one of the 7 legendary swordsmen." Masahiko waved his hand and interrupted him. "I know all of that, tell me about his purpose." Sakumo paused again, then said, "He seems to be a member of the Akatsuki. He has been tasked to ruin the marriage between the Senju and the Uchiha." Masahiko frowned, and sighed inwardly, so it was the Akatsuki. Jozo was so easily captured that he thought maybe it was another party. So the Akatsuki now is full of a bunch of idiots. I feel really sorry for the Akatsuki's name, no wonder Kakuzu left them. Masahiko's expression suddenly became solemn. Sakumo reacted quickly and also looked serious and kind of eager, thinking that Masahiko had discovered something important. "There is one more important thing now," Masahiko said word by word, "how about changing your son's name again?" "What?" Half a month passed, and Ichiraku Ramen finally got some improvement. Lately, because of rumors that someone has ate to death here, the business was in a downturn for a while, but because of the good quality and low price, it gradually returned to life. Masahiko's shop didn't improve. During this period, apart from selling to the Sunin, only Sakumo bought a figure of his own to help Masahiko take care of his business. Masahiko needed a smart strategy for the shop. So he decided first to identify the right people within the predetermined target market. At this price, only people who can do S-class tasks in Konoha can afford it. They must be acquaintances. Masahiko murmured, "It's a bit boring, though." Although he was ready to stay quiet until Konoha's 38th year, his inactive life was a bit unbearable, especially when there was no interesting event going on. Just when he could no longer bear to be lonely, a new fun thing arrived. Another familiar chakra fluctuation again, Sakumo is by his side, so it shouldn't be from the Akatsuki, he should be a messenger. Masahiko's shop is located right in the center of the village, so any visitor will have to pass by his door to get to the Hokage building. I remember that he was called Mainjutsu Hojiki, but there are a few ninjas with him that I don't know. Masahiko frowned, recalling carefully. They should be here in Konoha to retrieve their rogue ninja, and the Kubikarei Basho. Masahiko's heart moved the moment he had this new idea. If they redeem the Kubikarei Basho, I will be able to bring it back later. He was hesitant to take it directly from Konoha before, but if he was going to take it from Kirigakure, he wouldn't have any psychological pressure. Masahiko wasn't in a hurry. When Mainjutsu and his party return, they must pass by his shop again, and it will depend on the situation when that happens. Sure enough, after more than an hour, Sakumo accompanied Kirigakure's party to the gate. Mainjutsu had a big sword on his shoulder. The others escorted Jozo, not knowing how much they ended up paying to just get him back. Masahiko closed the shop's door, put the closed sign on it, then entered Black's mode. Sakumo escorted them to the gate, then turned around and returned, while Masahiko followed them quietly. He wasn't in a hurry. If he does it so close to the village, they might be mistaken for him. This distance should be enough. If I wait any longer, they will accuse the Uzumaki afterward. Masahiko murmured and prepared to start the action. Suddenly a violent gust of wind hit, Masahiko's face went dark as the scene became inexplicably familiar, but he didn't do anything yet. Or maybe it's me. Masahiko murmured, then perceived the surrounding area, to find that it was his shadow clone. It seems that his clone came from the Uzumaki village to take the sword. Sure enough, my clone had the same idea as me. What a waste of time. Masahiko watched his clone stun the Kirigakure's party, then snatched the sword away and escaped. "I'll just go back. It's really frustrating to find something fun, then it gets stolen by his own shadow clone." Back in Konoha, Sakumo was already waiting in front of Masahiko's shop. "Elder Masahiko, are you not going to take the sword?" Sakumo sighed and said. He became really familiar with Masahiko's character. Masahiko shook his head in denial. "How is it possible? I just went out for a walk." Sakumo obviously didn't believe him, but Masahiko continued to say anyway, "If it was me who robbed it, I would definitely admit it, but really not me." At the same time, he muttered inwardly, "My shadow clone took it, it really has nothing to do with me." Chapter 175, Figures for Everyone. Masahiko was robbed of fun by his shadow clone. After that incident, he thought he would be bored to death, but suddenly, his shop went viral. He doesn't know if someone advertised him, or the word about his skillful sculpturing was spread, but many people started to come, ignoring the price. A few days later, Masahiko actually earned more than 30 million ryo, almost the bounty of Asuma's the price of 20,000 bowls of ramen. Sure enough, the new generation is replacing the old one. People bought Sarutobi's figure more than Hashirama. Good things I didn't carve myself, none would have bought it. "Boss Hago Romo, I'm here again." Just when Masahiko thought, a familiar voice emitted, it was Jiraiya. Masahiko sighed helplessly, "Give up, I won't sell it to you." Jiraiya's purpose was very clear, he wants Tsunade's figure. "You old stubborn," Jiraiya murmured, then he pulled out the kids behind him, "I'm actually here with my disciples this time." Masahiko was a bit taken aback. Minato has been training hard and doing many C-class tasks lately, so he didn't see him for a long time. With a sunny smile, Minato took out a photo and handed it to Masahiko. Masahiko took a pause and looked at it. There was a group of children in the photo. Masahiko only knows Minato and Kushina, it should be their graduation photo. "Old stubborn, did you see that red-haired girl? Is it okay to help my disciple by carving one for her? You won't do it even for the sake of a little girl?" Masahiko hesitated, then looked at Minato's innocent expression. At that time, for Minato's sake, Masahiko ended up separating the couple. Now every time he sees his sad reaction, he feels guilty. "Alright, I'll carve one for you." "Thank you, Grandpa." Minato was much more polite than Jiraiya. Masahiko pretended to observe the photo for a long time, and then he began to carve little by little. It took him about half an hour to finally finish it. "Here you go, 1 million ryo." Of course, Minato wouldn't have that much money, and Jiraiya had to pay it for him with a sad face. "Old stubborn, carving a child should save you much wood, don't you think it should be cheaper?" Jiraiya tentatively said. Masahiko rolled his eyes, ignored it all, and took the money from his hand directly. Watching the two of them walking away, Jiraiya's voice still faintly rang out, "You've emptied you-sensei's savings this time, but it's okay. All that I want from you now is to practice harder, wait until you have enough strength, and then go claim your wife. If that old devil dares to stop you, I'll beat him." Masahiko heard this and felt like rushing over and knocking him out. Fortunately, the new customer that stunned Masahiko saved Jiraiya's life. "Boss, is it okay to watch?" Masahiko nodded, then responded formulaically, "Look at it freely, but don't touch." "Understood." Masahiko looked at him feeling confused. So, he didn't die. The costumer's name was Tsunade's lover, who was the lover of Tsunade in the original. He later died in the Second Shinobi World War, which is also one of the direct causes of Tsunade's phobia. Because of the changes in the course of the war, Masahiko had never seen him before, thinking that he had died on the battlefield in an unknown way, but it seems he was alive. After hesitating, Masahiko said with a smile. "You have Konoha's symbol on your forehead protector, but I've been in Konoha for so long and have never seen you." Kato was stunned for a moment and responded mildly, "I have been out on a mission for a long time, but I didn't see you before too." Masahiko nodded, and didn't speak any more. He already guessed what mission he was in charge of. Long-term mission, the 18 guarding ninjas? Because of me, that squad has 6 more people than the original, so he was appointed to join them? "Boss, I heard that every item in here is for 1 million, but do you take orders?" Masahiko nodded, and Kato also took a photo out. Damn it, is Naruto World's photographic technology is this advanced? Everyone has a photo. Masahiko took it. The photo's person was a bit familiar and looked very similar to Kato in front of him. This is my father. Seeing Masahiko comparing the photo with him back and forth, Kato took the initiative to explain. Kato's father Masahiko had a thoughtful expression. He was sacrificed in the previous war. I hope you can help me make a large wood sculpture for him. It would be even better if it could be as tall as me. Kato said sadly. Oh. Masahiko was silent for a moment, then he seemed like he remembered something. He actually met Kato's father before. It was when they first came up with the shinobi classification. His father wanted to be a jonin, but Masahiko rated him as a special jonin. I remember that I even kicked his butt out of my soul space. Boss, can you do it? Kato asked, as for the price. Masahiko waved his hand, smiled, and said, it doesn't matter, even if it's a big the statue, it will still be 1 million ryo, but you'll have to wait for 2 days. The joy crossed Kato's face. Thank you so much, boss. Watching Kato walk away, Masahiko mourned for Jiraiya in his heart. Since Kato didn't get killed, Masahiko felt that the chances for Tsunade to fell for Jiraiya have become really low. After all, Jiraiya didn't have the advantage in terms of character or appearance. It's not necessarily. The plot took a different direction. God knows if Kato will even like Tsunade. Masahiko murmured and started to work. The previous event was a microcosm for Masahiko's life after opening the Amazon store. For so many years, Masahiko has been revolving around the Senju and the Uzumaki. Unknowingly, many plot characters have been born, but Masahiko never interacted with them. For a year and a half, Masahiko's observation of Ichiraku Ramen made no progress, but as a figurine shop owner, he met all kinds of people. For example, the 15th generation of the Inoshikacho asked him to carve all 3 of them into one piece of wood. But because he felt like they were trying to fool him, Masahiko charged them an additional 500,000 ryo. Note, the 15th generation, are the fathers of Koji, Shikamaru, and Ino. Inoshikacho, literally means pig, deer, and butterfly. There are also the 12 genin's fathers, such as Abare Meishino and Inyazuka Kiba, etc. Although not all of them have visited Masahiko's shop, he will still found them in Ichiraku Ramen. Most of them liked Toki more than him. Although Masahiko's main purpose wasn't to open a popular shop, he felt like he was thrown away by Ichiraku Ramen, which made him sad. When I'm free in the future, I must find something that everyone can't refuse even if it's expensive. But now there wasn't much time for this. A year and a half passed in a flash. Noeke and Mikoto have already begun preparing for their wedding. The marriage of Senju and Uchiha is a big event for Konoha. This year and a half have been quite calm. Hiruzen and Danzo didn't try doing anything funny, and the Akatsuki lost a member but didn't respond. I must keep the identity of the shop owner for now. And the shadow clone will stay where it is as double insurance.